The ceiling of the Hawkage's private medical ward had exactly 217 tiles. Naruto knew this because he'd counted them 4 times in the last 3 hours, and each time he'd gotten 217, which meant either he was right or he was consistently wrong in the exact same way. And honestly, both options felt like they described his entire life. He shifted on the cot, wincing as the movement pulled at the bandages wrapped tight around his torso. The gash from the rogue Iwanin's wind blade ran from his left hip to the bottom of his ribs, not deep enough to be dangerous, not shallow enough to ignore. Tsunade had healed the worst of it herself, muttering about idiots who thought Sage Mode made them invincible, then left him here with strict orders to rest for 24 hours. That had been 6 hours ago. The ward was a small room attached to Tsunade's office by a short hallway, reserved for shinobi whose injuries required the Hawkage's personal attention or whose missions were classified enough that a regular hospital stay would raise questions. Right now, Naruto qualified on both counts. The mission to intercept a courier carrying stolen intel from the land of Earth had gone sideways when the courier turned out to be 3 Jonin-level shinobi using a transformation jutsu on a shadow clone. Naruto had handled it. He'd more than handled it, but one of them had gotten a clean hit in before he'd put them all down. The intel was recovered. The enemy shinobi were in Anbu custody, and Naruto was bored out of his mind. He sat up, swinging his legs over the side of the cot. The room was dim, lit by a single lamp on the side table. Through the small window, Konoha was settling into late evening, amber light fading from the rooftops, the distant sounds of the village winding down. He could hear nothing from Tsunade's office. She'd been pulled into an emergency council session about 2 hours ago, something about trade route disruptions along the southern border, and hadn't come back. "You're supposed to be resting," Kurama said from somewhere in the back of his mind. The fox's voice was a low rumble like distant thunder felt through the ground. I'm resting my eyes, on the ceiling, for the 5th time. Your heartbeat says otherwise, you're restless. Because there's nothing to do." Naruto stood, rolling his shoulders carefully. The wound protested but held. Tsunade's healing was thorough, the tissue was knitting fast, and with Kurama's chakra supplementing, he'd be fine by morning. She said 24 hours. It's been 6, that's basically the same thing. It is not basically the same thing. Close enough. He padded barefoot out of the ward and into the short hallway. The door to Tsunade's office was closed but not locked. She never locked it from this side, since the ward was supposed to be occupied only by people she trusted. Naruto pushed it open and stepped into the darkened office. Moonlight poured through the wide windows behind the Hawkage's desk, casting long silver rectangles across the floor. The office smelled like it always did: old paper, wood polish, and the faintest ghost of sake. Stacks of documents sat in organized chaos across the desk surface. The Hawkage's hat rested on its stand in the corner like a sleeping bird. Naruto wandered to the windows and looked out over the village. Konoha spread below him, a constellation of warm lights in the gathering dark. He could see the main street, the distant glow of Ikaraku's, the silhouette of the academy. Somewhere out there, his friends were going about their evenings. Sakura probably studying at the hospital, Kakashi reading his book on some rooftop, Shikamaru complaining about something while doing something brilliant. He should be out there, not stuck in here counting ceiling tiles. He turned from the window and his eyes drifted across the office. He'd been in here dozens of times, but always with Tsunade present, arguing about missions, getting lectured, occasionally getting flicked in the forehead hard enough to see stars. He'd never been alone in the room before. "Don't." Kurama said. "Don't what?" "Whatever you're thinking." "I'm not thinking anything." "Your curiosity has a specific chakra signature. I can feel it spiking." Naruto grinned despite himself and moved toward the desk. He wasn't going to do anything, he was just looking. The documents on top were mundane. Mission assignments, budget approvals, a half-written letter to the Kazekage about joint training exercises, a sake cup with a ring of dried liquid at the bottom. A framed photo he'd seen before, the old Team Hiruzen, young Tsunade flanked by Jiraiya and Orochimaru, the third Hokage smiling behind them. He opened a drawer. Pens, sealing wax, blank scrolls. Another drawer, personnel files. He spotted his own name on a folder and resisted the urge to read it. A third drawer held nothing but a bottle of sake and a clean cup, which was so perfectly Tsunade it almost made him laugh. The bottom left drawer was locked. Not just locked, sealed. As Naruto's fingers brushed the handle, he felt the faint electric tingle of Fuinjutsu running through the wood. It was subtle, woven into the grain of the desk itself so that you wouldn't notice unless you touched it directly. The kind of seal work that was meant to be invisible. Kurama. I felt it. The fox's voice had shifted, less annoyed, more interested. Old chakra, Senju lineage sealing. Decades old, at least. She refreshes it periodically, but the base structure, that's from when she first took office. Why would she seal one drawer and leave the rest open? Because whatever's in there, she doesn't want anyone to find it, which means you should leave it alone. Naruto stared at the drawer. Kurama was right. He knew Kurama was right. This was the Hokage's private office, and whatever she kept locked away behind blood lineage seals was her business. He should go back to the ward, lie down, count the ceiling tiles a sixth time, and pretend he'd never noticed. He pulled his hand back, then he put it back on the drawer. I hate you, Kurama said. You're curious too, don't lie. The fox was quiet for a beat. The seal is Senju-based. Normally, only someone with Senju blood or a seal key could open it. But Fuinjutsu is Fuinjutsu, and you are, annoyingly, an Uzumaki. The Uzumaki clan's sealing knowledge was broader and deeper than the Senju's. If you channel your chakra into the mechanism and feel for the pattern. I know how to pick a seal lock, Kurama. Then why are you still standing there? Naruto pressed his palm flat against the drawer front and closed his eyes. He pushed a thin thread of chakra into the wood, feeling it meet the seal matrix like water finding cracks in stone. The Senju seal was elegant, a 4-layer tumbler system that required a specific chakra signature to disengage. But it was also old. Tsunade had designed it to keep out casual snoopers and even most seal-literate shinobi, but she'd built it decades ago. And Naruto's Uzumaki heritage gave him an intuitive understanding of seal architecture that most people couldn't match. He didn't try to fake the signature. Instead, he found the structural supports of the seal, the load-bearing patterns that held the matrix together, and gently, carefully created a bypass. Like finding a loose thread in a tapestry and pulling it just enough to create a gap without unraveling the whole thing, the seal clicked. The drawer slid open. You know, Kurama said, for someone who claims to be straightforward and honest, you are disturbingly good at breaking into things. Jiraiya taught me. He said a good shinobi knows how to get into places he's not supposed to be. Jiraiya was talking about women's bathhouses. The principle's the same. Inside the drawer, there was a single object. A journal, small, leather-bound, the cover cracked and darkened with age. It had been white once, maybe, or pale brown. Now it was the color of old rust. Naruto picked it up and felt the weight of it, heavier than it should have been for its size, as if the pages carried more than just ink. The cover was stained. Dark, irregular blotches that had soaked deep into the leather. Naruto had seen enough bloodstains to recognize them. He opened it. The handwriting inside was neat and precise, a medic's handwriting, trained for clarity in field notes. The first page read, Field Journal, Dan Kato, Special Jonin 2nd Shinobi World War, Northern Campaign Classified. Personal Naruto felt a strange prickle at the back of his neck. Dan Kato. Tsunade's lover, dead in the Second War, the man whose dream of becoming Hokage she carried like a torch. Shizun's uncle. He knew the story, everyone did. Dan had died on the battlefield, bleeding out despite Tsunade's desperate attempts to save him. It was the defining tragedy of her life, the wound that never closed, the reason she'd left the village, the reason she drank, the reason she flinched at the sight of blood. Why would she keep his journal locked behind her strongest seal? He flipped through the pages. Most of the entries were field notes, observations about enemy movements, supply tallies, medical assessments. Dan had been meticulous. But as Naruto moved deeper into the journal, the tone shifted. The entries became longer, more personal. Dan's handwriting stayed precise, but the words carried an urgency that leaked through the clinical language. Naruto stopped at an entry dated roughly 3 weeks before Dan's recorded date of death. I found something I wasn't supposed to find. During the medical inventory review, I was cross-referencing Tsunade's compound formulas with the standard field pharmacopoeia, routine stuff, making sure we weren't running low on anything critical. But one of her formulations didn't match anything in the standard texts. I thought it was a custom painkiller or an experimental coagulant. She's brilliant enough to have developed her own. It wasn't a painkiller. The compound is a chakra-reactive mutagen. When I isolated the active components and ran them against the restricted research archives we captured from the enemy's medical unit, I found a partial match, because the enemy's version was crude, a blunt instrument. Tsunade's was refined, perfected. I think it's a component of something much larger, something related to the Senju bloodline. I've been digging. Carefully. God, I've been careful. But what I've found... Naruto turned the page. It's called the Sozo no Kinju, the forbidden loom of creation. Hashirama Senju sealed it into the Senju bloodline itself. Not a scroll, not a technique manual. The knowledge is encoded into their DNA, accessible only through specific chakra-mediated extraction processes. It's the ultimate biological weapon, a jutsu framework capable of rewriting the cellular template of any living being. You could give anyone wood release. You could create artificial Senju. You could, theoretically, rebuild a human being from the ground up. Tsunade knows. She's always known. She's been carrying this secret her entire life. The implications are staggering. Every village in the world would kill for this. Every village would kill to destroy it. The Senju clan's prominence wasn't just talent and will. It was built on a biological foundation that their founder encoded deliberately. Hashirama didn't just grow trees. He rewrote the rules of what a human body could be, and he made sure his descendants could do it again. I understand why it's a secret. I do. But this is exactly the kind of hidden power that perpetuates the cycle of war. Villages hoard bloodline advantages, other villages try to steal them, and the fighting never stops. If this were brought to light, shared openly, studied collectively with proper safeguards, it could be the foundation for real peace. Real trust between nations. I'm going to talk to Tsunade. She needs to understand that keeping this buried is part of the problem. Naruto's mouth was dry. He turned to the next entry. The date was 5 days later. She said no. Not just no, she was furious. I've never seen her like that. She said I had no idea what I was meddling with, that Hashirama sealed it for a reason, that revealing it would make every living Senju a target for extraction and experimentation. She said the other villages wouldn't use the knowledge for peace. They'd use it for war. She said I was being naive. Maybe I am, but I've seen what secrets do to this world. I've watched good people die because one village had an advantage another didn't. I became a shinobi to protect people, and I can't protect anyone if the system itself is designed to produce conflict. I told her I was going to bring it to the Hokage, to Lord Hiruzen. Let him decide. She grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise and told me that if Hiruzen knew, Danzo would know within a week, and Danzo would not share it. Danzo would weaponize it. She's not wrong about Danzo. But I can't just pretend I don't know. 3 more entries. The handwriting was the same, but tighter, more controlled. As if Dan was pressing harder with the pen. Something's wrong with my healing supplies. I noticed it 2 days ago. The standard field kit Tsunade prepared for me, the coagulant paste, the chakra-enhanced bandages, the emergency stimulant pills. They taste different. The paste has a faint bitterness that wasn't there before, and the stimulants dissolve faster on the tongue than they should. I could be paranoid. Battlefield stress does that. But I ran a basic reagent test on the coagulant paste, and the color reaction was off. Not by much, a shade lighter than standard, which suggests the active compound concentration has been altered. I haven't used any of it. I've been using supplies from the general stock instead. I need to talk to someone about this. But who? Tsunade prepared those kits herself. She always does mine personally. She says it's because she wants to make sure they're perfect. She's always been meticulous about my safety. God, listen to me. She loves me. I know she loves me. This is probably nothing. The next entry was the last. The handwriting was uneven, scrawled fast. The page was stained, more blood, still dark after all these years. She knows I switched to general stock. She didn't say anything. She just looked at my kit pouch. I'd moved the general supplies into it, same pouches, same placement, but she could tell. She always could tell. She looked at me across the command tent, and there was something in her eyes I've never seen before. Not anger. Not love. Something behind both. Like a door closing, I'm being deployed to the front line at dawn. She signed the order herself. If something happens to me, if someone finds this journal, know this. Tsunade Senju is not who anyone thinks she is. She carries a secret in her blood that could reshape the world, and she will do anything to keep it buried. Anything. I love her. That's the worst part. Even now, writing this, I love her. And I think she loves me too, but she loves the secret more. She loves the legacy more. Dan Kato, Special Jonin, Land of Fire. If this is my last entry, I hope someone braver than me finds it. Naruto closed the journal. His hands were shaking. Not from the wound in his side, not from cold. His hands were shaking because the words on those pages had rearranged something fundamental in his understanding of the world, and his body was reacting before his mind caught up. Naruto. Kurama's voice was quiet. Not mocking, not sardonic, just present. She killed him. That's what it looks like. She killed him. He found out about this forbidden loom thing, and he wanted to go public with it, and she killed him. She tampered with his healing supplies so his wounds wouldn't close on the battlefield, and she sent him to the front line knowing. His voice cracked. He pressed his palm against the desk surface, steadying himself. She watched him bleed to death. She held him while he bled to death, and the whole time she was the reason the bleeding wouldn't stop. Kurama said nothing. Her phobia, Naruto said. The blood. Everyone thinks it's because she couldn't save him, because she tried and failed. But it's not. It's because she succeeded. Kurama finished. Naruto sat down in Tsunade's chair. The leather creaked under him. Through the windows, the village lights continued their steady glow, and for a long moment, everything was very quiet and very still. And the journal sat on the desk between his hands like a live explosive. He thought about Tsunade. He thought about the woman who'd flicked his forehead and called him a brat, who'd bet her necklace that he couldn't learn the Rasengan in a week and lost, who'd poured everything she had into healing him after Pain's assault, burning through her own life force to save the village, who'd told him she believed in him when almost no one else did. He thought about her drinking. The decades of it. The wandering, the gambling, the running. He'd always understood it as grief, the tragic broken woman who'd lost everyone she loved, and maybe that was true in a way. But it wasn't the whole truth. The drinking wasn't grief, it was guilt. Every bottle, every lost bet, every mile between her and Konoha, it was all penance. A slow, deliberate self-destruction that she'd never let end because ending it would mean she'd gotten away with it. This is going to break a lot of things, Kurama said. Yeah. What are you going to do? Naruto stared at the journal. He thought about putting it back, relocking the drawer, resetting the seal, going back to his cot, and counting the ceiling tiles until morning. He could pretend he'd never seen it. Tsunade was the Hokage. She'd sacrificed years of her life for this village. She'd made a terrible choice during a terrible war, and she'd been punishing herself for it ever since. Maybe that was enough. Maybe some secrets deserved to stay buried. He picked up the journal and slid it into his jacket. It's not enough, he said. He went back to the ward. He lay on the cot. He did not count the ceiling tiles. He stared at the darkness above him and turned the situation over and over in his mind like a stone in a river, feeling for the edges. Dan Kato had been right. The secret, the forbidden loom, was exactly the kind of hoarded power that kept the shinobi world locked in its cycle of violence. And Tsunade had killed to keep it hidden. Not out of malice, maybe, out of fear. Out of a desperate, cornered conviction that revelation would be worse than silence. But Dan was still dead, and the secret was still buried, and nothing had changed in 30 years, and the blood phobia. The hemophobia that everyone treated with such gentle sympathy. Naruto felt something hot and sharp in his chest when he thought about it. All those years of people tiptoeing around Tsunade's trauma, speaking in soft voices about her loss, giving her space to grieve. And underneath it all, the real wound was self-inflicted. She hadn't just failed to save the man she loved. She'd murdered him, with medicine, with the very skills that were supposed to make her a healer. "You're angry," Kurama observed. "Damn right I'm angry." "Good. Anger keeps you sharp, but don't let it make you stupid." Naruto closed his eyes. "I'm not going to do anything stupid. Your track record suggests otherwise, Kurama." "I'm merely providing historical context." Despite everything, Naruto almost smiled. Almost. "I need to talk to her face to face tonight. She's in a council session. She'll be back. And when she comes back, I'll be here." He waited. Time moved strangely in the dark, stretching and compressing, minutes feeling like hours and hours like minutes. He heard the distant murmur of the village outside, the occasional bark of a dog, the soft footsteps of Anbu patrols on the rooftops. Kurama's presence was a warm pressure at the back of his mind, alert and watchful. Somewhere around midnight, he heard the office door open. Footsteps. The click of a lamp, the scrape of a chair. Then the quiet, unmistakable sound of a bottle being uncorked, followed by the soft glug of liquid pouring into a cup. Naruto lay still, listening. He heard Tsunade sigh, a long, exhausted exhalation that carried the weight of a 4-hour council session about trade routes. He got up. His side barely hurt anymore. Kurama's chakra had been working on it while he waited. He walked through the short hallway and stopped in the doorway of the office. Tsunade sat behind her desk, the lamp casting warm light across her face. She looked tired. The transformation jutsu that maintained her youthful appearance was perfect as always. Smooth skin, sharp features, honey blonde hair pulled back. But tiredness lived in the eyes, not the skin, and her eyes were old. She had a cup of sake in one hand and a mission report in the other, and she didn't look up when he appeared. "You should be resting," she said. "Can't sleep." "That's what the rest is for. You don't have to sleep. Just lie down and let the healing do its work." Granny Tsunade. Something in his tone made her look up. He watched her eyes find his face and read what was written there, and he watched the precise micro-expressions play across her features. Annoyance first, then curiosity, then a thin edge of something else. Wariness, maybe? What is it? Naruto reached into his jacket and pulled out the journal. He held it up where she could see it, the blood-stained leather visible in the lamplight. The color drained from Tsunade's face. Not slowly, not subtly, all at once, like someone had pulled a plug. The sake cup slipped from her fingers and hit the desk, splashing clear liquid across the mission reports. She didn't notice. Her eyes were fixed on the journal with an intensity that bordered on violence. "Where?" she said. Her voice was very, very steady. The kind of steady that only came from absolute white-knuckle control. "Where did you get that?" "Your desk, bottom left drawer." "That drawer is sealed." "I'm in Uzumaki. We wrote the book on seals, literally." Tsunade stood. The chair scraped back hard enough to hit the wall. She was tall, taller than people expected, and in this moment, with her shoulders rigid and her fists clenched at her sides, she seemed to fill the room. The lamp flickered as her chakra flared, involuntary and razor-sharp. "Give it to me," she said. "No," the word hung between them. Naruto watched Tsunade process it, watched the command instinct war with something else, something deeper and more desperate. She was the Hokage. She could order him to hand it over. She could take it by force. She was one of the legendary Sannin, and even diminished by years of drinking and self-neglect, she was strong enough to crush him through a wall without breaking a sweat. But she didn't move. Because she could see in his eyes that he'd read it, and she knew what was in those pages, and the moment of taking it back by force would be an admission that everything Dan had written was true. "You read it," she said. Not a question. Every word. Tsunade closed her eyes. When she opened them, something had shifted, a wall coming up, thick and practiced. You broke into my personal effects, violated a security seal, and stole classified material from the Hawkage's office. Do you understand how many regulations you've broken? Do you understand what you did to Dan Kato? The name hit her like a physical blow. Naruto saw it, the flinch, barely suppressed, that rippled through her body. Her jaw tightened. Her hands, steady enough to perform surgery on a battlefield, trembled at her sides. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said. "I know what he wrote. He found out about the forbidden loom, the Jutsu Hashirama sealed into the Senju bloodline. He wanted to go public. You said no. He was going to go to the third Hokage anyway. And then his healing supplies started tasting wrong, and then you sent him to the front line. Dan was a soldier. Soldiers die in war. Not like that. Not because the person who was supposed to keep them alive decided they were a liability." Tsunade moved around the desk toward him. Fast, not attack fast, but confrontation fast. She stopped 2 paces away, close enough that he could smell the sake on her breath and the faint antiseptic scent that always clung to her from the hospital. "You have no idea," she said, her voice dropping low, almost a whisper, "what that war was like. You have no idea what was at stake. If Dan had gone to Hiruzen, if word of the forbidden loom had reached any other village, every Senju, every person with even a drop of Senju blood would have been hunted, captured, experimented on, dissected. You think the bloodline purges in the mist were bad. Imagine that, but targeted, systematic. Every nation on the continent sending their black ops teams to harvest Senju genetic material. So you killed him. I protected my family." The shout cracked through the room like a thunderclap. Papers scattered off the desk. The windows rattled. Somewhere in the building, Naruto heard the hurried footsteps of Anbu responding to the Hawkage's chakra spike. Tsunade caught herself. She took a breath, then another. Her chakra smoothed out, the killing edge receding, and she raised a hand toward the door, a signal that everything was fine. "Stand down." The footsteps receded. In the silence that followed, Naruto could hear his own heartbeat. "You protected your family," he repeated quietly. "By killing the man who loved you." Tsunade turned away from him. She walked to the window and stood with her back to him, looking out at the village. Moonlight painted her in silver and shadow. When she spoke again, her voice was different, stripped, raw. Like something had been peeled back, and there was nothing left but the truth underneath. Dan was the best man I ever knew, better than Jiraiya, better than me by a mile and a half. He was kind and brave and righteous, and he would have made a spectacular Hokage, and I loved him so much it felt like a physical law, like gravity. She pressed her forehead against the window glass, but he was going to get people killed, not on purpose, never on purpose. Because he believed the world was better than it was. He believed that if you just showed people the truth, they'd do the right thing with it. And I knew, that was wrong. I'd seen what villages did with biological secrets. I'd seen the experiments Orochimaru was already running, and he didn't even know about the loom. I imagined the knowledge out there, loose, in the hands of every ambitious leader and every desperate military council, and I saw the future Dan was going to create. A world where Senju weren't people anymore, just resources. So you made the choice for him. I made the choice for everyone. Naruto let the silence hold for a long time. He needed it. He needed space to reconcile the woman in front of him with the woman he'd known for years. The healer. The Hokage. The drunk who'd gambled her way through 3 countries and come back when her village needed her. She wasn't a monster. He could see that. But she'd done a monstrous thing, and the distinction mattered less than she probably wanted it to. "You've been punishing yourself for 30 years, he said. She didn't turn around. "Is that your professional psychological assessment? The drinking, the gambling, the running, the hemophobia, it's not because you couldn't save him, it's because you chose not to. Every time you see blood, you see what you did." Tsunade's shoulders tightened. She pressed her palm flat against the window, and for a single instant, Naruto thought he saw the transformation jutsu flicker, a hairline crack in the illusion, a flash of age beneath the youth. "What do you want, Naruto?" she asked. "Revenge, justice? You want to drag me in front of the council and watch them strip my title? Is that what this is?" "No." "Then what?" He walked closer to her. Not aggressive, not tentative. Just closer, until he was standing beside her at the window, looking out at the same village, the same lights. "I want you to make it mean something." Tsunade finally turned to look at him. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She hadn't cried. He didn't think she'd let herself cry in years, but the effort of not crying was written all over her face. "Explain," she said. "Dan wanted to change things. You killed him to stop that. And then you spent 30 years running from what you did, and nothing changed. The shinobi system is still broken. Villages still hoard bloodline secrets. People still die in wars fought over power that a handful of clans decided to keep to themselves. Dan's death didn't protect anyone. It just delayed the inevitable and destroyed you in the process." Tsunade stared at him. "You think it's that simple? Just what? Declassify the forbidden loom? Hand the most dangerous biological technique in history to a world that's barely held together by a patchwork of alliances and mutual distrust? I think it's more complicated than that, and I think you know it is too. That's why I'm not standing in front of the council right now. I'm standing here talking to you." He met her eyes. She was the Hawkage, a Sannin, a woman who could kill him with a flick of her finger, and he wasn't afraid of her. Not because he was stupid or reckless, but because he'd stared down pain, he'd faced the Nine Tails, and he'd learned something that Tsunade had forgotten a long time ago, that the scariest things in the world weren't the things that could hurt you, but the things that could change you. "You have 1 week," he said. 1 week to what? To figure out how to make this right. Dan died because you chose the secret over the truth. You owe it to him, to yourself, to find a way to honor what he was trying to do. Not recklessly. Not by just dumping the information out into the open. But something. Some real, concrete step toward the kind of change he believed in. Tsunade's expression was unreadable. "And if I don't, then I will. You'll go public. Tell the council, the other villages. I'll find a way to make Dan's sacrifice mean something, with or without you. I'd rather it be with you, but I'm not going to let you keep sitting on this for another 30 years while people die in a system that you could help fix." Tsunade looked at him for a long, long time. The lamp flickered. The village murmured in the distance. And something passed between them that Naruto couldn't name. Not a threat, not a promise, but a kind of recognition. She was seeing him, really seeing him, as something more than a loud kid with too much chakra and a dream. And he was seeing her as something more than a broken woman in a chair too big for her guilt. "You're serious," she said. "I'm always serious when it matters. You're 16, old enough to fight wars, old enough for this." Tsunade exhaled slowly. She reached for the sake cup on the desk, found it empty and knocked over, and stared at it as if it had betrayed her. 1 week, she repeated. 1 week. "And the journal stays with me, Naruto. It's not a negotiation. The journal is my insurance, and honestly, it's the only reason I believe you won't just send Anbu to my apartment at 3 in the morning to make this go away." Something flickered in Tsunade's eyes, a flash of something dark and complicated. Shame, maybe. Because they both knew that the thought had crossed her mind, even if she'd never act on it. That was the poison of what she'd done to Dan. It made every future interaction carry the shadow of that calculus. If she killed once to protect the secret, why not again? "I would never," she said quietly. "I know," Naruto said, and he did believe her. But trust was a funny thing. It lived in the same body as caution, and right now, caution was winning. 1 week, Granny Tsunade. Think about it. Really think about it. Not as the woman who's been running for 30 years. As the Hawkage. He turned and walked to the door. He stopped with his hand on the frame. "For what it's worth," he said without turning around, "I think Dan was wrong about you. He said you loved the secret more than you loved him. But I think you loved him exactly as much as he thought you did. I think that's what made it so hard." He left. The hallway was dark and quiet. He walked past the medical ward without stopping, through the outer office and into the corridor beyond. The Hawkage Tower was mostly empty at this hour. A few admin staff on the night shift, a pair of Anbu guards at the main entrance who nodded as he passed. The night air hit his face as he stepped outside, cool and carrying the smell of late spring. Konoha spread around him, sleeping and peaceful. He looked up at the Hokage monument, 4 stone faces carved into the mountain, watching over the village in permanent vigil. Hashirama Senju's face was the leftmost, the founder, the god of shinobi. A man who dreamed of peace and then hidden the most dangerous weapon in history inside his own family's blood. "You're thinking too hard," Kurama said. "I can practically hear the gears grinding. What do you make of it, the forbidden loom?" "If it's real, and the seal on that journal was old enough and sophisticated enough that I believe it is, then it's exactly what Dan described. A technique capable of rewriting biological templates. Hashirama wasn't just powerful, he was a designer. Wood release wasn't a natural mutation. It was an engineered capability that he built into his lineage. The Senju weren't born exceptional, they were made. And Tsunade's been sitting on that her whole life. As did Hashirama, and Tabarama after him. And likely the third Hokage to some extent. I doubt he was completely ignorant. The powerful always hoard their advantages, kid. It's what makes them powerful." Naruto walked through the streets, hands in his jacket pockets, the journal a solid weight against his chest. The village was quiet around him, a few late-night stragglers, a cat darting across a rooftop, the warm glow of a convenience store on the corner. Normal life. A world built on top of 100 buried secrets, each one a load-bearing pillar that, if removed, might bring the whole structure crashing down. But that was the problem, wasn't it? You couldn't build anything new until you dealt with the foundations. And the foundations were rotten. He reached his apartment and let himself in. The place was small and messy, dishes in the sink, a training scroll unrolled across the table, his orange jacket from yesterday thrown over a chair. He locked the door, set 2 perimeter seals a habit Jiraiya had drilled into him during their training trip, and sat on the edge of his bed. He pulled out the journal and looked at it. Dan Kato had been a good man. Not a naive man, his writing was too perceptive, too self-aware for that. He'd known the risks. He'd known what the revelation might cost. And he'd decided the cost was worth it, because the alternative was a world that kept feeding its children into the same machine and calling it tradition. Dan had been right. And Tsunade, for all her strength and sacrifice and genuine love for the village, had been wrong. Not evil, not monstrous, but wrong. And the world had gone on being broken, and people had gone on dying, and the secret had stayed secret, and nothing had changed. Naruto set the journal on his nightstand. He lay back and stared at the ceiling. This ceiling had fewer tiles than the medical ward. He'd never counted, but it felt smaller, more personal. His ceiling. His home. Tomorrow, things would start moving. Tsunade would either come to him with a plan, or she'd start maneuvering against him, and either way, the equilibrium of the last 16 years of his life was about to shatter. He'd need allies. He'd need information. He'd need to understand the forbidden loom well enough to make informed decisions about it, which meant research, which meant libraries and archives, and probably a very uncomfortable conversation with Sakura about medical jutsu theory. And he'd need Jiraiya. Not for protection, Naruto could protect himself, but for perspective. Jiraiya had loved Tsunade too in his way. He'd known Dan. He'd been part of that era, that war, those choices. If anyone could help Naruto navigate this without destroying everything, it was his teacher. "You should sleep," Kurama said. "Whatever comes next, you'll face it better rested. Since when do you care about my sleep schedule? Since your survival became directly tied to mine, your well-being is my investment, brat." Naruto smiled faintly. "Good night, Kurama. Good night." And Naruto, what you did tonight took courage. Walking into a room with one of the most dangerous shinobi alive and telling her you know her worst secret without backup, without an exit strategy. That was either very brave or very stupid. Can't it be both? With you, it usually is. Naruto closed his eyes. Sleep came slowly, in fragments, interrupted by thoughts that circled like hawks. But beneath the churning anxiety and the weight of what he'd learned, there was something else. A hard, bright core of certainty that he recognized from every other impossible moment in his life. The feeling he'd had when he'd faced Neji in the Chunin exams, when he'd stood in front of Pain over the crater that used to be his village, when he'd reached out to Kurama for the first time and felt the fox's hatred, and chosen to meet it with stubborn, unreasonable hope. The feeling that said, "This matters. This is what you're supposed to do. And you are not going to back down." He slept. The morning came bright and sharp, sunlight cutting through his curtains like a blade. Naruto woke instantly, a shinobi's reflex, zero to alert in the time it took to open his eyes. He felt the journal on the nightstand. He felt Kurama's presence, awake and watchful, and he felt the weight of what lay ahead settle onto his shoulders like a cloak. He got up, washed, ate a quick breakfast of instant ramen, some habits were sacred, and dressed. He slid the journal into a concealed pocket inside his flak jacket. He'd sewn it himself after a mission where he'd needed to smuggle intelligence documents through enemy territory. The pocket was lined with a thin layer of chakra-dampening fabric, which would mask the journal's residual chakra signatures from casual sensor types. He checked his perimeter seals. Intact. No one had tried to enter the apartment during the night, which meant Tsunade hadn't sent anyone after him. Yet, the morning was loud and alive, Konoha in full swing, market stalls opening, genin teams assembling for missions, civilian workers heading to their jobs. Naruto moved through the streets, with his hands in his pockets and his eyes open, reading the flow of foot traffic with the unconscious alertness of someone who'd been trained to spot ambushes in forest and desert alike. He felt a presence tracking him from the rooftops within 10 minutes of leaving his apartment. Subtle, professional, Anbu-level stealth. But Sage Mode wasn't just a combat tool. The enhanced sensory awareness it provided lingered in a passive, attenuated form even when he wasn't fully activated. He could feel the natural energy of the world around him, and a hidden shinobi displaced that energy in a specific, recognizable way, one follower. Moving parallel to his route 3 buildings over, maintaining consistent distance, not closing in, just watching. Anbu or Root. He asked Kurama internally. Hard to tell at this range, but the chakra control is extreme. I'd lean Root. Anbu are good, but Danzo's people are trained to suppress their signatures to near zero. Root. That was interesting and troubling. If Danzo already had eyes on him, it meant one of two things. Either Danzo had surveillance on the Hawkage's office and had picked up fragments of last night's confrontation, or Danzo was running a standing operation to monitor Naruto's movements, and this was routine. Neither option was comforting. Naruto didn't alter his route. He walked to Ikaraku's, ordered a bowl of miso ramen, and ate it slowly. The morning crowd flowed around him. Tuchai and Iame made small talk. Mission okay? You look tired, Naruto. Want extra pork? And he smiled and joked with them while his mind worked on 3 separate tracks. Track 1, Tsunade. She'd had the night to think. She was either planning her next move or still reeling. He needed to know which. Track 2, Danzo. If Root was already watching him, Danzo might know about the journal, or he might not. But Danzo had spent decades trying to consolidate power, and a weapon like the Forbidden Loom would be exactly the kind of thing he'd kill to acquire. Naruto needed to understand how much Danzo knew and how quickly he was moving. Track 3, Jiraiya. His teacher was supposed to be in the village. He'd sent a messenger towed 2 weeks ago saying he'd be back for a resupply and intelligence debrief. If he was here, Naruto needed to find him today. He finished his ramen, paid, and stepped back into the street. The Root operative was still there, patient as a shadow. Naruto grinned. He made a single hand sign, not the full cross formation for his signature technique, just a subtle half sign that anyone watching might mistake for a habitual gesture. A shadow clone flickered into existence in the alley behind Ikaraku's, already transformed into a nondescript civilian. The clone would lead the Root operative on a boring, meandering tour of the village, while Naruto slipped away. The real Naruto dropped into the storm drain system, beneath the market district. It was gross, wet, dark, and smelling of things he didn't want to think about, but it was also one of the few places in Konoha that wasn't covered by standard surveillance. He'd mapped the drain system during his academy days, when he'd been a smaller and more enthusiastic prankster, and the knowledge had never stopped being useful. He emerged 3 blocks from the hot spring district, where Jiraiya always stayed when he was in the village. The Toad Sage had a standing arrangement with a particular inn, a quiet place that catered to traveling merchants and asked few questions about guests who came and went at odd hours. Naruto walked in the front door. The innkeeper, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a permanent expression of tolerant exasperation, looked up from her ledger. "He's in room 6. He's been expecting you." "He has," he said, and I quote, "When a blonde idiot shows up looking like he's carrying the weight of the world, send him up." Naruto climbed the stairs to room 6 and knocked. "It's open," Jiraiya's voice called from inside. The room was small and comfortable. A futon, a writing desk covered in papers, and a window overlooking the hot springs steam clouds. Jiraiya sat cross-legged on the floor, a scroll open across his lap and a cup of tea in his hand. He looked the way he always looked, big, white-haired, toad oil smell clinging to him like cologne. But his eyes were sharp, and they fixed on Naruto with an intensity that said he'd already sensed something was wrong. "You look like hell, kid. Nice to see you too, pervy sage. Sit down. You're making the room tense just standing there." Jiraiya poured a second cup of tea from a pot on the desk. "Tsunade told me you took a nasty hit on the Iwa mission. You healing up?" "I'm fine. The wound's almost closed." Naruto sat down across from Jiraiya and took the tea. He didn't drink it. He held it in both hands and felt the warmth against his palms and wondered how to say what he needed to say. Jiraiya watched him. The old man had many modes: clown, pervert, sage, warrior, but beneath all of them was an intelligence as sharp as a surgical blade, and right now that intelligence was fully engaged. "Out with it," Jiraiya said. "You didn't sneak through the sewer system to talk about your health." "How did you?" "You've got mud on your sandals and you smell like drain water. I trained you, remember? I know your infiltration routes." Jiraiya set down his tea. "What happened?" Naruto reached into his jacket and pulled out the journal. He set it on the floor between them. Jiraiya looked at it. His face didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted. A flicker of recognition, or maybe just the instinct of a man who'd seen enough blood-stained documents to know that nothing good came in that packaging. "Dan Kato's field journal," Naruto said. "I found it in Tsunade's desk last night." Jiraiya didn't pick it up. He looked at it, then at Naruto, then back at it. "Where in her desk?" "Bottom left drawer, sealed with Senju Fuinjutsu, and you opened it." "I'm in Uzumaki." Jiraiya was quiet for a long time. The steam from the hot springs drifted past the window. Somewhere in the inn, a floorboard creaked. "What's in it?" he asked, and his voice was careful in a way Naruto had rarely heard. The truth about how Dan died, and something called the forbidden loom of creation. Jiraiya closed his eyes. "You know," Naruto said, "it wasn't a question." "I know pieces, not the whole picture." Jiraiya opened his eyes and reached for the journal. This time he picked it up, turning it over in his hands. The bloodstains on the cover caught the light. "I was there during the Second War. I fought alongside Dan and Tsunade both, when Dan died." The official story was that he was critically wounded in an ambush and bled out before Tsunade could stabilize him. It was a tragedy. It was war. People died. "But you suspected." "I suspected that the grief didn't fit. I've seen people lose loved ones in combat. I've lost people myself." The way Tsunade broke afterward, it was too complete, too total. Grief is a wound. What happened to Tsunade was more like an amputation. She didn't just lose Dan, she lost herself. And that kind of destruction usually means guilt, not just loss. "You never asked her." "I asked her once." "In the years after." "She was drunk, really drunk, the kind of drunk where the walls come down. I asked her if there was something about Dan's death she hadn't told me. She looked at me with the deadest eyes I've ever seen on a living person and said, 'If I told you, you'd kill me.' I thought she was being dramatic. Now," He looked at the journal. Can I read this? That's why I brought it. Jiraiya read. Naruto watched his teacher's face as the words sank in, as the shape of the truth assembled itself from Dan's careful, terrified entries. He watched Jiraiya's jaw tighten. He watched the color change in his cheeks. He watched the precise moment when the last entry hit home. She knows I switched to general stock, and saw something break behind the old man's eyes. Jiraiya set the journal down very gently, as if it were made of glass. The forbidden loom, he said. His voice was rough. Hashirama's legacy project. I'd heard whispers, nothing concrete. The Toad Sage archives at Mount Myaboku reference something called the Senju Inheritance Protocol, but the Toads refused to elaborate. They said it was sealed knowledge, and that opening it would cause more harm than good. Seems like a lot of people have said that over the years. Because it might be true. Jiraiya met Naruto's eyes. I'm not defending what she did. But the forbidden loom, if it's what Dan described, is not just a secret. It's a trigger. The kind of information that starts wars, not small ones, world wars. Dan didn't want to start a war, he wanted to prevent one. Dan was a good man with a good heart and an incomplete understanding of how power actually works. Sharing the knowledge wouldn't create trust, it would create an arms race. Every village trying to replicate the technique before their rivals could. Every hidden faction trying to kidnap a Senju test subject. It would be the Hyuga incident times 1,000. Naruto clenched his fists on his knees. So you're saying she was right. That killing him was the correct call. I'm saying the situation had no correct answer. Just varying degrees of terrible. Jiraiya's voice was heavy, old. He suddenly looked every one of his years. What are you going to do? I gave her a week to come up with a plan to make this right. Make it right how? I don't know yet. That's her problem to figure out. But the status quo isn't working. 30 years of burying this hasn't made the world safer. It's just made Tsunade drunk and left the same power sitting there like a bomb waiting for someone else to find it. What happens when Danzo figures it out? What happens when Orochimaru does, if he hasn't already? Jiraiya flinched at Orochimaru's name. You think Orochimaru knows? He was obsessed with bloodline limits. He experimented on children trying to replicate would release. If he didn't know about the forbidden loom specifically, he was circling the same territory from a different direction. And Danzo, Naruto hesitated. I had a root operative tailing me this morning. Jiraiya's expression sharpened instantly. You're sure? Kurama confirmed. The chakra suppression was root grade. That could be standing surveillance. Danzo watches everyone. Or it could mean he knows something's happening and he's moving. Either way, I need to assume he's a factor. Jiraiya stared at him. There was something in the old man's gaze that Naruto hadn't seen before, not quite surprise, not quite pride, but something in the space between. A recognition that the kid sitting across from him wasn't a kid anymore. Not really. You've thought this through, Jiraiya said. I've been thinking about it all night. And you're not scared. Of Tsunade, no. Of Danzo, no. Of what might happen, yeah, a little, but being scared and backing down are two different things. Jiraiya smiled. It was small and sad and genuine. You sound like him. Like who? Like Dan. Like your father. Like every stubborn bastard who ever looked at the world and said this isn't good enough and actually meant it. He picked up his tea and drained it in one long swallow. All right, I'm in. I didn't ask you to. You didn't have to. You came here because you needed someone to think this through with, and I'm the best strategic mind you've got access to who isn't currently sitting in the Hokage's chair having an existential crisis. Jiraiya rolled up the scroll he'd been reading and set it aside. Here's what we need to do. First, secure that journal. Not just physically. You need copies. Distributed to multiple secure locations so that no single point of failure can destroy the information. Naruto nodded. He'd been thinking the same thing. Second, we need to understand the forbidden loom before we can make any decisions about it. Right now, all we have is Dan's description, which is secondhand. We need primary source information. That means either getting it from Tsunade or finding another way to access Hashirama's original research. Is there another way? Jiraiya thought for a moment. Maybe. The Uzumaki had deep ties with the Senju. Mito Uzumaki, your distant relative Hashirama's wife, would have known if there are surviving Uzumaki archives. The Uzumaki homeland was destroyed. Destroyed, not erased. Ruins remain. And the Uzumaki were the greatest seal masters who ever lived. They would have ensured their most important knowledge survived. Hidden vaults. Pocket dimensions sealed into the physical architecture. I've always wanted to mount an expedition to the ruins of Uzushiagakure, but it's deep in contested territory, and the political situation never allowed it. Third, Naruto prompted. Third, Danzo. If he knows or suspects anything about the Forbidden Loom, he's the most immediate threat. Not because he's the strongest person involved, but because he's the most ruthless and the best connected. We need intelligence on what he knows and what he's planning. I can't exactly walk up to Root headquarters and ask. No, but I have sources. The intelligence network I've built isn't just for tracking Akatsuki. Jiraiya stood and moved to the window, looking out over the rooftops. 1 week. You gave Tsunade 1 week. That's not much time. It's enough for her to decide what kind of person she wants to be, and if she decides wrong. Naruto stood too. He could feel the journal against his chest, the weight of Dan's words and Dan's blood. He could feel Kurama's presence, steady and watchful. And he could feel, beneath all the uncertainty, that hard, bright core of certainty that had carried him through every impossible moment of his life. Then I figure out the next step. That's how I've always done it. 1 step at a time, 1 problem at a time, and I don't stop until it's done. Jiraiya looked at him for a long moment. Then he laughed, a real laugh, warm and tired and something close to affectionate. Your mother would have loved this. Kushina would have kicked down Tsunade's door on the spot. Good thing I've got more restraint than my mom. Kid, you have the exact same amount of restraint as your mom. You've just learned to aim it better. Jiraiya clapped him on the shoulder. Go home, rest. Let me work my network. I'll have something for you by tomorrow on Danzo's movements. And Naruto, be careful. The moment this gets beyond you, me, and Tsunade, the game changes. Permanently. Naruto nodded. He took the journal back, secured it in his jacket, and headed for the door. Naruto, he turned. Jiraiya's face was serious. No mask, no performance. Just the man underneath, the one who'd lost friends and students and the love of his life to the grinding machinery of the shinobi world and kept going anyway. Dan Kato was my friend. He deserved better than what he got. Whatever happens next, thank you for not letting it stay buried. Naruto held his teacher's gaze. 1 week, he said. He left the inn and stepped into the bright, busy morning. The village moved around him in its familiar rhythms, oblivious to the tectonic shift happening beneath the surface. A week. 7 days to decide the fate of a secret that had been buried for longer than he'd been alive. He walked home with the sun on his face, and the journal against his heart, and the certainty in his chest burning like a coal. Somewhere behind him, the Root operative picked up his trail again. Above him, the stone faces of the Hokage monument watched the village they'd built on a foundation of secrets and sacrifice. Naruto didn't look up at them. He looked forward. 1 week. Chapter 2. The weight of knowing Tsunade didn't sleep. She sat at her desk in the dark for hours after Naruto left, the overturned sake cup still dripping onto a stack of mission reports she no longer cared about. The lamp had guttered out at some point, and she hadn't bothered to relight it. Moonlight was enough. Moonlight was too much. Honestly, it showed her reflection in the window glass, and she didn't want to see her own face right now. The drawer was open. The seal was broken. The journal was gone. She'd kept it for 31 years. Not as a trophy, the thought made her stomach lurch, but as penance. A physical reminder, locked away but always present, always there, beneath her hands every day as she sat in this chair and pretended to be the kind of person who deserved it. Some nights, when the sake wasn't enough and the guilt broke through the floor she'd built over it, she'd open the drawer and hold the journal and feel the dried blood on the leather and remember what it had cost. What she had cost. And now a 16-year-old genin. No, he wasn't a genin anymore, not really, not after pain, not after everything. had cracked her seal in probably under a minute, and walked out with the worst thing she'd ever done tucked into his jacket like a paperback novel. She pressed her fingers to her temples. Her head was pounding. Not from sake, she'd barely had half a cup before Naruto appeared. This was a different kind of headache. The kind that came from 30 years of carefully maintained denial cracking open like an egg. You have 1 week to figure out how to make this right, or I will, she almost laughed. The audacity. The sheer, unbelievable, Uzumaki-branded audacity of that boy, giving her, the 5th Hokage, granddaughter of the god of Shinobi, one of the legendary Sannin, a deadline. Like she was a genin who'd turned in a late mission report. Like the most complicated, painful decision of her life could be resolved with a 7-day turnaround. But beneath the indignation, in the place where she kept the things she didn't want to look at, a quieter voice said, "He's right." She crushed that voice flat and reached for the sake bottle. The next several hours passed in a haze. She drank slowly, not to get drunk, but to smooth the edges, to keep the rawness from overwhelming her ability to think. She needed to think. She needed to plan. Naruto had the journal, and the journal was a weapon pointed directly at everything she'd built. The political calculus was brutal. If the journal's contents became public, if the village council, the daimyo, the other nations learned that the 5th Hokage had murdered her lover to protect a forbidden biological weapon hidden in her own bloodline, the consequences would cascade. Her removal from office. Criminal prosecution, possibly. The destabilization of Konoha's leadership at a time when the Akatsuki threat was still unresolved. And worse, the revelation of the Forbidden Loom itself, which would trigger exactly the kind of international crisis Dan had been too idealistic to foresee, and that she'd been too terrified to risk. She needed that journal back. The thought came cold and clean, and she hated herself for thinking it, and she thought it anyway. By dawn, she had a plan. It wasn't a good plan. It was the plan of a woman running on no sleep and too much sake and 3 decades of survival instinct. But it was a plan. She summoned Shizune. Her assistant arrived within 15 minutes, which meant she'd been sleeping in the administrative wing again. A habit she'd picked up during the reconstruction after Paine's attack, when there was too much work and too few hours. Shizune appeared in the office doorway in her standard uniform, dark hair pulled back, tauntaun tucked under one arm. She took one look at Tsunade, and her expression shifted from professional attentiveness to open concern. "Lady Tsunade, you look..." "Don't." Shizune closed her mouth. She set tauntaun down, and the small pig trotted to her usual spot by the bookshelf, sniffing the air with an expression of porcine worry. "Close the door," Tsunade said. "Activate the privacy seals." Shizune did. The room hummed faintly as the sound-dampening fuinjutsu woven into the walls engaged. No one outside would hear a word. "Naruto was in my office last night," Tsunade said. "He opened my desk, the sealed drawer." Shizune went very still. She knew about the drawer. She didn't know what was in it. Tsunade had never told her, but she knew it existed, knew it was important, knew it was sealed with the strongest protections Tsunade could create. The fact that someone had opened it was, by itself, alarming. "He took what was inside," Tsunade continued. A journal. Dan's journal. The name landed differently on Shizune than it had on Naruto. This was personal. Dan Kato was Shizune's uncle, her family. The man whose memory had shaped her entire life, whose death had sent Tsunade spiraling into the years of wandering that Shizune had loyally followed. Shizune's eyes widened, and something complex and unreadable passed across her face. "Uncle Dan's journal," she said carefully. "You had Uncle Dan's journal in your desk. For how long? Since before you were born. And you never told me. It wasn't yours to know." Shizune's jaw tightened. It was a small movement, quickly controlled, but Tsunade saw it. She saw the flash of something in Shizune's eyes that might have been hurt, or anger, or the first hairline crack in a loyalty that had held firm for 20 years. "What's in the journal?" Shizune asked. Tsunade hesitated. This was the moment. She could tell Shizune the truth, all of it, and risk losing the one person who'd stood by her through everything, or she could tell her just enough to get the job done. She chose the second option because she was a coward, and because she'd been choosing the second option for 31 years, and old habits were the last to die. Dan discovered classified information about the Senju bloodline shortly before his death. Information that is extremely sensitive and potentially destabilizing. He recorded it in his journal. If that information were to become public, it would endanger the village. What kind of classified information? The kind that people start wars over. I need you to understand, Shizune, this isn't about my pride or my reputation. This is a genuine national security concern. Shizune studied her. Tsunade could see her assistant weighing the words, measuring them against years of experience. Shizune was not stupid. She was, in fact, one of the most perceptive people Tsunade had ever known, trained by Tsunade herself to read body language, assess credibility, and detect deception. The irony of having created the perfect tool to see through her own lies was not lost on Tsunade. What do you need me to do? Shizune asked. I need you to retrieve the journal from Naruto. Retrieve it how? Talk to him, reason with him, explain that he's holding classified material that he's not authorized to possess, appeal to his sense of duty, whatever works. And if he won't give it back, Tsunade paused. He'll give it back. He respects you. He'll listen. Shizune looked at her for a long moment, long enough that Tsunade felt the weight of the gaze like a physical thing. Then Shizune nodded, collected Taunton, and left. Tsunade sat alone in the sealed office and listened to the silence and knew, with the bone-deep certainty of someone who'd made too many wrong choices to count, that this one was also wrong. Shizune found Naruto at Training Ground 7. He was working through a kata sequence. Basic taijutsu forms, nothing flashy, the kind of foundational practice that most advanced shinobi skipped because they thought they'd outgrown it. But Naruto moved through the forms with a precision and fluidity that told Shizune he hadn't outgrown anything. He deepened it. Each strike was clean, each transition smooth, the whole sequence flowing like water finding its level. His side was unbandaged, the wound had closed to a thin pink line, already fading. He saw her coming. She could tell by the subtle shift in his stance. He didn't stop the kata, but his awareness expanded, tracking her approach without breaking rhythm. She waited at the edge of the clearing until he finished the sequence, ending in a grounded stance with both fists at his sides. Shizune. He turned to face her, and his expression was open, friendly, and completely unreadable. It was an expression she'd never seen on him before. The friendly part was Naruto, the unreadable part was new. She sent you, he said, not accusatory, just factual. Shizune didn't insult him by pretending otherwise. She asked me to talk to you about the journal. She asked you to get it back. Yes. Naruto sat down on a training post, legs dangling. He looked young, sitting like that, with the morning light catching his hair. He looked exactly his age. But his eyes were older. Something had happened to them between yesterday and today. What did she tell you? He asked. That the journal contains classified information about the Senju bloodline, that it's a national security concern. That's it? That's it. Naruto was quiet for a moment, watching a bird hop across the grass near the memorial stone. She didn't tell you what the information actually is. No. Did she tell you how Dan died? The question hit Shizune like a punch. She felt it in her chest, a sharp contraction, involuntary. My uncle died in combat during the Second War. He was critically wounded and bled out before Tsunade could stabilize him. I know the story. Naruto's voice was gentle, which somehow made it worse. Shizune, sit down, please. She sat, on the grass across from him, Taunton settling into her lap. The training ground was peaceful around them, trees rustling, sunlight dappling, the distant sound of the village. It felt wrong. Whatever was about to happen, it deserved a darker setting. I'm not going to give you the journal, Naruto said. Not because I don't trust you, I do. But because what's in it changes everything, and you deserve to hear it from Tsunade, not from me. Naruto. Ask her, Shizune. Don't ask me. Go back and tell her that I said no, and then ask her what's really in the journal. Ask her why she kept it sealed away for 30 years. Ask her about the forbidden loom. Shizune's brow furrowed. The what? The forbidden loom of creation. Ask her about that, and ask her what really happened to your uncle. Something in the way he said it, what really happened, made the air go cold around her. Shizune was a medical ninja, trained to read vital signs the way other people read books. She could see that Naruto's heartbeat was elevated, that his pupils were slightly dilated, that the muscles around his jaw were tight with restrained emotion. These were the signs of someone telling a truth they didn't want to tell. "You're saying the official story of my uncle's death is wrong," she said. "I'm saying you should hear the truth from the person who was there." He paused. "I know this is hard, and I know you loved Tsunade." "I love her too. She's been more of a grandmother to me than anyone I've ever had. But love doesn't mean closing your eyes." Shizune stood. Taunton squeaked at the abrupt movement. She felt unsteady, not physically, but in some deeper way, as if the ground beneath the ground was shifting. "One more thing," Naruto said. "Be careful. Not of Tsunade, I don't think she'd ever hurt you, but there are other people who might be interested in what's happening. I had a Root operative following me yesterday." "Root, Danzo's people. I don't know how much they know, but assume they're watching. Don't have this conversation with Tsunade anywhere that could be monitored." Shizune stared at him. The boy she'd known, loud, brash, charging headfirst into everything, was still there. But layered over him, woven through him, was someone else. Someone who assessed threat levels and mapped surveillance networks, and understood that information was a weapon as dangerous as any jutsu. "When did you grow up?" she asked, and it came out softer than she'd intended. Naruto smiled, and for a second he was just a kid again. "Sometime between the 5th and 6th time I almost died, probably." Shizune turned and walked back toward the village. Taunton trotted at her heels, unusually quiet. The sunlight that had felt warm a few minutes ago now felt thin and inadequate, like it was trying to illuminate something too large and dark for mere daylight. "Ask her what really happened to your uncle." She walked faster. Across the village, in a building that didn't appear on any official map, Danzo Shimura sat in a room without windows and listened to a report from an operative whose face he'd long since forgotten beneath the porcelain mask. Subject Uzumaki visited the Hokage's office after hours. Duration: approximately 40 minutes. Elevated voices were detected through the sound-dampening seals. The seals muffled specific content, but emotional intensity was registered as extreme. Subject Uzumaki then departed the Hokage Tower, carrying an object concealed in his jacket. Object dimensions are consistent with a small book or journal. Danzo said nothing. His visible eye was fixed on a point in the middle distance, and his bandaged arm rested in his lap with the stillness of something that was not quite flesh. Subject Uzumaki subsequently traveled to the Shimigakure Inn in the Hot Spring District. He entered the room of Jiraiya of the Sannin. Duration: approximately 1 hour. Upon departure, the object was still in his possession. "And the Hokage?" Danzo asked, remained in her office until dawn. "No visitors." She consumed sake and appeared to be in distress, though the observation angle through the window was suboptimal. Danzo processed this. The Root operative waited in perfect silence. Not patient, exactly, because patience implied the capacity for impatience, and this particular operative had been trained beyond such things. "This morning," Danzo said, "the Hokage's assistant." Shizune was dispatched to make contact with Subject Uzumaki at Training Ground 7. Conversation lasted 12 minutes. Shizune departed without obtaining the object. She is currently en route back to the Hokage Tower. Danzo's eye narrowed by a fraction. The narrowing was the only visible sign of the calculation happening behind it, a rapid, ruthless assessment of variables, probabilities, and opportunities. He knew about the forbidden loom. He'd known for over 20 years, pieced together from fragments, intercepted communications, interrogation transcripts from captured enemy researchers, Orochimaru's early notes before the snake's defection, and the careful observation of Tsunade's behavior. The loom was the reason he'd pushed so hard for Tsunade's appointment as Hokage after Hiruzen's death. Not because he believed in her leadership, he didn't, but because a senju in the Hokage's chair was a senju under his surveillance. A senju he could study. A senju whose bloodline secrets he could, given sufficient time and leverage, extract. He'd been working toward that extraction for years. Slowly. Methodically. The way you tunneled through bedrock, not with explosions but with constant, grinding pressure. He'd placed root operatives in the hospital where Tsunade trained medics, intercepted samples of her blood during routine medical procedures, funded black-budget research into senju genetic markers through proxies so thoroughly laundered that not even his own analysts could trace the money back. And he'd gotten close. His researchers had identified the genetic architecture that housed the loom, a complex, multi-layered encoding system that was part DNA, part chakra imprint, and part something else entirely that defied current scientific understanding. They couldn't read it yet. But they could see it. Like finding a locked door and knowing the room behind it held exactly what you were looking for. Now, something had changed. Something had happened between Naruto and Tsunade that involved a concealed object and emotional intensity and Jiraiya, and a failed retrieval attempt. The pieces didn't yet form a complete picture, but Danzo could see the outline, and the outline was enough. Increase surveillance on subject Uzumaki to priority 2, he said. I want to know where he goes, who he talks to, and what he's carrying. I want his apartment monitored, external observation only, do not breach the perimeter. He's placed seals and tripping them would alert him. Understood. Additionally, prepare a social engineering approach. I want a plausible pretext for making direct contact with Uzumaki. Something that doesn't raise suspicion. A mission assignment, perhaps, or an advisory meeting. The Hawkage controls mission assignments. Through the administrative chain, yes, but emergency deployments can be authorized by the Council in the Hawkage's absence. Prepare the paperwork for a plausible scenario. I'll determine the timing. The operative nodded and dissolved into shadow with the fluid, boneless movement that was Root's signature. Danzo sat alone in his windowless room and thought about the boy who carried the secret in his jacket like it was a lunchbox. Naruto Uzumaki, the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, the child of the 4th Hokage and the Uzumaki princess. The boy who defeated pain and earned the village's love through the same brute force sincerity that made him simultaneously admirable and exhausting. Danzo did not love the village the way Naruto did, loudly, sloppily, with his whole chest. Danzo loved it the way a surgeon loved a patient, with detachment, precision, and the willingness to cut out anything diseased. The village was not a family, it was an organism. And organisms survived not through sentiment, but through adaptation, strength, and the ruthless acquisition of advantage. The forbidden loom was the ultimate advantage. A biological master key that could transform Konoha from a village of diverse but limited bloodlines into something unprecedented. A population of engineered shinobi, each one carrying the Senju legacy, each one a potential would-release user. An army that would make all other villages irrelevant. True, lasting peace, not through cooperation and trust, as the naive would have it, but through such overwhelming superiority that conflict became pointless. This was not evil. Danzo had never understood why people called it that. It was efficiency. It was the logical end state of a system that rewarded power. If you wanted to stop the cycle of war, you didn't share your weapons with your enemies. You made your weapons so overwhelming that no enemy would dare challenge you. He rose and moved to his desk where a stack of files waited. He opened the top one, a dossier on Naruto Uzumaki, updated weekly. He read through it again, looking for leverage points. The boy was strong, dangerously so. Sage mode, growing cooperation with the Nine-Tails, Uzumaki vitality, his father's intelligence when he bothered to use it. Direct confrontation was inadvisable, but strength was not the same as wisdom, and wisdom was not the same as experience. Naruto was 16. He thought in straight lines. He believed in people. He trusted too easily and forgave too quickly. These were weaknesses. And Danzo had never met a weakness he couldn't exploit. Shizun's hands were shaking when she arrived back at the Hokage's office. She hid them in her sleeves the way she'd been doing since she was 13. A trick learned during the wandering years, when showing fear around Tsunade's gambling rivals could get you hurt. The privacy seals were still active. Tsunade was at her desk, a fresh cup of tea in front of her, her hair rebound and her composure reassembled. She looked up when Shizune entered, and Shizune saw the question in her eyes before she asked it. "He said no," Shizune reported. Tsunade's jaw flexed. He said no, and he told me to come back and ask you what really happened to my uncle." Silence. The kind of silence that had texture, thick, suffocating, like walking through wet cloth. Tsunade's hand moved toward the teacup, then stopped. It just stopped mid-reach, hanging in the air. Shizune watched her mentor's face cycle through expressions like weather moving across a landscape, surprise, calculation, resignation. And then something raw and unprotected that Shizune had never seen before. Not in 20 years of standing at this woman's side. "He also told me to ask you about something called the forbidden loom of creation." Tsunade's hand dropped to the desk. "Sit down. I'll stand." The words came out sharper than Shizune intended, or maybe exactly as sharp as she intended. She wasn't sure anymore. The ground beneath the ground was still shifting, and she could feel herself tilting, reaching for balance that kept receding. Tsunade looked at her for a long time. Not at her the way a hawkage looks at an assistant, at her the way a person looks at someone they've wronged and are about to wrong further by finally telling the truth. "You deserve to know," Tsunade said quietly. "You've always deserved to know. I was just too much of a coward to tell you." And she told her everything. The forbidden loom, what it was, how Hashirama had created it, how it was encoded into the Senju bloodline. Dan's discovery, his idealism, his insistence on disclosure. Their arguments, fierce, passionate, the kind of arguments that only people who love each other can have, where every word is a knife because you know exactly where to cut. And then she told her about the healing supplies. Shizune listened. She stood perfectly straight with her hands at her sides, and she listened the way a medic listens to a terminal diagnosis, professionally, completely, with a stillness that was not calm, but rather the absence of everything else. Taunton pressed against her ankle, whimpering softly. When Tsunade finished, the office was very quiet. "You killed him," Shizune said. Her voice was flat, clinical. The voice she used in surgery when things were going wrong and panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. "Yes. You tampered with his medical supplies. You ensured his wounds wouldn't close, and then you sent him to the front line." "Yes. And then you held him while he bled to death, and you let him think you were trying to save him, and you let the whole world think it was a tragedy, that you were a victim, that you'd failed." Shizune's voice cracked on the last word, a fracture running through the clinical facade. "I was 5 years old. I grew up hearing about how my uncle died a hero, and how the great Tsunade Senju was broken by the grief of it. I modeled my entire life around following in your footsteps because I thought you were a healer who'd lost the most important person in her world and kept going anyway. And the whole time," she stopped. Her breath was coming too fast. She pressed her fingers against her own wrist, an automatic gesture, checking her pulse, grounding herself in clinical data when the emotional data was too much. "The hemophobia," she said. "I spent years helping you manage it. I adapted my entire medical practice around your triggers. I made excuses for you. I covered for you in front of patients and colleagues and the council, all because I thought it was grief, trauma from loss, but it was guilt. It was always guilt." "Shizune, don't." Shizune's hand came up, palm out, a wall. "Don't you dare comfort me right now. Don't you dare tell me it was complicated or that you had no choice or that you've suffered enough. You killed my uncle. You murdered him. With medicine. With the skills you taught me to revere." Tsunade didn't defend herself. She sat behind her desk with her hands in her lap, and she took it, all of it, the way she'd taken everything for 30 years, by absorbing it, by letting it add to the weight she carried, by refusing to break because breaking would be a release she didn't deserve. "What are you going to do?" Shizune asked. Her voice was steadier now, but her eyes were wet. "What do you mean? Naruto gave you a week. What are you going to do?" "I don't know. That's not good enough." Tsunade looked up sharply. Shizune met her gaze, and there was steel in it, steel that Tsunade had put there, through years of training and discipline and demanding excellence. The student reflecting the teacher's own strength back at her. Naruto is right, Shizune said. I don't know what the forbidden loom is, not really, not the technical details. But I know that whatever you did it to protect a secret, and the secret is still there. 31 years later, nothing has changed. My uncle is dead and the world is exactly the same. If I'd let him reveal it. I don't care about the hypothetical, I care about now. Shizune wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, one quick, efficient gesture. You owe Dan, you owe me, and you owe this village the truth, or at least a path toward it. Figure it out. She turned and left the office. The door closed behind her with a click that sounded like a period at the end of a sentence. Tsunade sat alone. After a long time, she opened the bottom left drawer. Still open, still empty, the broken seal mocking her from the wood grain, and stared into the space where the journal had been. Then she pulled out a blank scroll and began to write. Naruto spent the rest of the morning making copies of the journal. Not physical copies, those could be stolen, burned, destroyed. He used a technique Jiraiya had taught him during their training trip, sealing the written content into storage scrolls that could only be accessed with a specific chakra key. He made 4 copies. One he gave to a shadow clone transformed into a sparrow, which flew to a hollow tree in the Forest of Death that Naruto had used as a dead drop since his academy days. One he sealed into the underside of the 3rd Hokage's memorial bench in the cemetery, a location so public and so emotionally charged that no one would think to look there. The 3rd went to Gamakichi via a quick summoning, with instructions to store it at Mount Mayaboku. The 4th he kept on his person, next to the original. He was finishing the last seal when Sakura found him. She appeared at his apartment door without knocking, a habit she'd developed after years of finding him in various states of post-training exhaustion, and deciding that waiting for an invitation was less efficient than just walking in. She was in her hospital uniform, white coat over standard gear, her pink hair pulled back in a practical tail. You weren't at the hospital this morning, she said. Was I supposed to be? Your follow-up appointment, for the wound, which Tsunade specifically scheduled. Sakura's green eyes swept the apartment, cataloging the training scrolls on the table, the ink on his fingers, the faint residue of sealing work in the air. She was a medic, she noticed things. You look like you haven't slept. I slept. For how long? Some amount of time. Sakura sat down at his kitchen table without being invited, turnabout, apparently, being fair play. She pushed aside a stack of scrolls and fixed him with the look she'd perfected during her apprenticeship under Tsunade. The look that said, I will wait here until you tell me the truth, and I have the patience of a geological process. Something's going on, she said. Between you and Lady Tsunade. Naruto kept his expression neutral. What makes you say that? Because I was at the hospital at 6 this morning, and Shizune came through looking like someone had hit her with a genjutsu. Not the I'm trapped in an illusion kind. The I just found out something terrible, and I'm holding it together through sheer willpower kind. And she wouldn't talk to me. Shizune always talks to me. She's my senpai. We literally have tea together every morning. Today she walked past me like I wasn't there. Sakura leaned forward, elbows on the table. And then I checked with the Anbu at the tower, and they told me there was a chakra spike from the Hokage's office last night. A big one. Tsunade level. At approximately the same time, you were supposed to be resting in the medical ward 30 feet away. That's a lot of detective work for 7 a.m. Naruto, what happened? He looked at her. Sakura Haruno, his teammate, his friend, the girl who'd punched him through walls and healed his wounds and fought beside him against enemies that should have killed them both. She was sharp, she was strong, and she was Tsunade's apprentice. That last part was the problem. I can't tell you yet, he said. Sakura blinked. What? I can't tell you yet. Not because I don't trust you, I do with my life, but this involves Tsunade directly and you're her student. I need to give the situation a few days to develop before I bring more people in. Sakura's expression went through surprise, offense, calculation, and landed on something that looked like grudging respect. You're protecting me from a conflict of loyalty. I'm giving you plausible deniability in case things go sideways. Those are the same thing. Yeah, I know. Sakura studied him. He could practically see the gears turning. She was connecting dots, filling in gaps, building a picture from incomplete data the way she'd been trained to do. Medics were analysts by nature. They took symptoms and constructed diagnoses. It's serious, she said. Not a question. Very, are you in danger? Maybe, not from Tsunade, from other people who might be interested in what I've found. You found something. Her eyes went to his jacket, to the barely perceptible bulge where the journal sat. In the Hawkage's office. That's what the chakra spike was about. You confronted her with something, and she reacted. Sakura. I know, you can't tell me. She stood up, her chair scraping back. She was frustrated. He could see it in the set of her shoulders, the way her fingers curled and uncurled. Sakura didn't like being on the outside of things. She'd spent too much of her early career watching from the sidelines while Naruto and Sasuke charged ahead. 3 days, she said. What? I'll give you 3 days. Then you tell me what's going on or I find out myself. And believe me, Naruto, if I start pulling medical records and cross-referencing Tsunade's sealed archives, I will find answers. I'm her apprentice. I have access she doesn't realize I have. Naruto looked at her, really looked at her. The morning light caught the determination in her eyes, and he was struck, not for the first time, by the force of her. People underestimated Sakura. They saw pink hair and a temper and forgot that underneath was a mind like a scalpel and a will like bedrock. 3 days, he agreed. And Sakura, be careful around the administrative wing. Don't ask Shizune about this. Don't ask Tsunade. And if anyone from Root approaches you for any reason, come find me immediately. Her eyes widened slightly. Root, Danzo's involved? Maybe, I don't know how much he knows. Just be careful. She held his gaze for a moment longer, then nodded and left. He heard her footsteps recede down the hallway, quick and purposeful. Naruto leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. The morning was half gone, and he'd already navigated conversations with Shizune, Sakura, and the lingering shadow of last night's confrontation with Tsunade. Each one had cost something: emotional energy, tactical positioning. The careful management of information that he was rapidly learning was as exhausting as any physical fight. Welcome to politics, Kurama said dryly, where the battles never end and no one ever throws a punch. People throw plenty of punches in politics, metaphorical ones. Tell that to the third Hokage. Fair point. Naruto stood and moved to the window. The village spread below his apartment, rooftops and streets and the distant mountain with its carved faces. He could feel the Root operative out there, patient and invisible, maintaining their surveillance perimeter. I need to do something about Danzo, he said. What do you have in mind? I need to know what he knows. Jurei is working his network, but that takes time. I need something faster. You could simply confront him. Walk into Root headquarters and ask Danzo what he's up to? Why not? You confronted the Hokage last night. Danzo is, theoretically, a subordinate authority. Naruto considered this. It was insane. It was also, in a strange way, the most Naruto approach possible, direct, unexpected, and completely against the rules of political maneuvering. Danzo would be expecting subtlety, surveillance, information warfare. He would not be expecting Naruto Uzumaki to walk up to his front door and say hello. That's actually not the worst idea you've ever had, Naruto said. I resent the qualifier. But not yet. I need more information first. I need to understand the Forbidden Loom itself, what it actually does, how it works, what it would take to access it. Right now, all I have is Dan's second-hand description. That's not enough to make decisions with. The Uzumaki archives, Kurama said. The Toad Sage mentioned them. If Mito Uzumaki knew about the loom, then there might be records in the ruins of Uzushiagakure. But that's a major expedition into dangerous territory, not something I can do in a week. There might be closer resources. Mito lived in Konoha for decades. She would have brought records with her. Where did her personal effects end up after she died? Naruto paused. That was an excellent question. Mito Uzumaki, Hashirama's wife, the first Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails, his own distant clan relative. She'd lived in the village until her death when the Nine Tails was transferred to Kushina. Her personal effects would have gone. Where? To the Senju compound, probably, or to the Hokage's archives. The Uzumaki Mask Shrine, he said suddenly. In the village outskirts, I went there once when I was trying to learn the Reaper Death Seal. There were Uzumaki artifacts there. If Mito kept personal archives, some of them might be stored there. It's worth checking. Naruto grabbed his jacket, a different one, tactical, with the journal secured in the lined pocket, and headed out. The afternoon was bright and warm, and he moved through the village with purpose now, not wandering but navigating. He took an indirect route to shake, or at least complicate the route tail, cutting through market crowds, doubling back through alley networks, and at one point running vertically up a building face and across 3 rooftops just to create distance. The Uzumaki Mask Shrine sat at the edge of the village, nestled in a grove of old trees near the eastern wall. It was a small, unassuming building, wooden, traditional, with the Uzumaki spiral carved above the entrance. Most people walked past it without a second glance. It was registered as a cultural heritage site, maintained by a single caretaker who came by once a week to sweep. Naruto pushed open the door and stepped inside. The interior was dim and cool, the air heavy with the smell of old wood and older paper. The masks lined the walls, dozens of them, each one carved with an Uzumaki face, each one housing a sealed fragment of clan knowledge. He'd only interacted with one of them before, the Shinigami mask, during the crisis that had required understanding the Reaper Death Seal. But there were others. Many others. And as Naruto moved deeper into the shrine, he felt them, faint pulses of chakra, dormant but present, responding to his Uzumaki blood like tuning forks vibrating in sympathy. There, Kurama said. 3rd row from the left, the mask with the closed eyes. Naruto looked. The mask was small, smaller than the others, almost child-sized. Its carved face was serene, eyes closed, mouth curved in a slight smile. Unlike the other masks, which were painted in bold reds and blacks, this one was pale, almost white, with delicate blue spirals tracing its cheeks. He reached for it. As his fingers touched the carved surface, he felt a seal activate, not aggressively, not defensively, more like a lock recognizing a key. The mask's chakra reached out and tested his, sampling his bloodline signature, measuring his Uzumaki heritage against some internal standard. It accepted him. The mask's eyes opened, carved lids sliding back to reveal empty sockets that suddenly blazed with pale blue light. A scroll materialized in the air before the mask, unrolling itself with the crisp efficiency of well-maintained fuinjutsu. The paper was pristine, despite its age, protected by the same sealing technology that had preserved the Uzumaki's most important records for generations. The heading at the top of the scroll, written in the archaic but legible script of the old Uzumaki clan, read, Personal Archive of Mito Uzumaki, ne Uzumaki-ri, the Senju Inheritance, notes on the Sozo no Kinju classification. Uzumaki eyes only Naruto's pulse spiked. Well, Kurama said, and there was something in the fox's voice that might have been anticipation. It seems Dan Kato wasn't the only one who found the truth worth recording. Naruto began to read. Mito's writing was different from Dan's, more formal, more technical, but carrying the same undercurrent of urgency. She'd been a seal master of the highest order, and her analysis of the Forbidden Loom was meticulous. The Sozo no Kinju is not a jutsu in the conventional sense. It cannot be performed, learned, or taught. It is a biological architecture, a framework of chakra-reactive genetic code that Hashirama designed and embedded into the Senju lineage during the clan's founding era. The loom exists as potential, not as action. It is the blueprint for a process, not the process itself. To activate the loom requires 3 components. a senju of sufficient bloodline purity to serve as the template source, a seal master capable of extracting and translating the biological code into a workable jutsu format, and a subject willing or unwilling to undergo the rewriting process. The implications are profound and terrible. With the loom activated, one could theoretically rewrite any human being's cellular structure to incorporate senju traits, including, but not limited to, enhanced vitality, chakra density, and the would-release Kekkei Genkai. The rewriting process is not gentle. My husband described it as teaching a river to flow uphill. The subject's existing biological template must be partially deconstructed before the new template can be imposed. Survival rates, based on Hashirama's own theoretical models, are estimated at 30 to 40%. Hashirama sealed the loom for this reason. He believed the knowledge was too dangerous to exist in any accessible form and too important to destroy entirely. His compromise was to encode it into the senju bloodline itself. Hidden, dormant, accessible only to those who knew where to look and had the technical skill to extract it. I have that skill. As an Uzumaki seal master, I can read the biological code and translate it. I have chosen not to. I agree with my husband's assessment. The world is not ready for this knowledge. Perhaps it never will be, but I am not naive enough to believe that secrets stay buried forever. Someone will find it. Someone will try to use it. And when they do, there must be a countermeasure. I have designed one. Naruto's breath caught. The countermeasure is a sealing array that can permanently disable the loom within a living senju, removing the encoded architecture from their genetic template without harming the subject. I call it the unraveling. It is, in essence, the opposite of the loom. Where the loom writes, the unraveling erases. If the loom is ever activated, or if its existence becomes known to those who would misuse it, the unraveling can be applied to all living senju to remove the knowledge from the bloodline entirely. The secret dies with the biology. I have encoded the unraveling into this archive. Any Uzumaki with sufficient sealing knowledge can access and deploy it. I pray it never becomes necessary. Mito Uzumaki Naruto stared at the scroll. His mind was racing, connections forming like lightning between clouds, Dan's discovery, Tsunade's secret, Danzo's ambitions, and now this. A countermeasure. A way to neutralize the forbidden loom permanently, designed by the one person who had both the knowledge and the wisdom to create it. Mito had seen this coming. Not the specific circumstances, not Naruto, not Dan's murder, not any of it, but the inevitability. The certainty that a secret this big, held this tightly, would eventually crack, and she'd prepared. The unraveling, Kurama murmured. A failsafe built into a failsafe. Your ancestor was a remarkable woman. She was married to Hashirama. She probably had to be. Naruto carefully rolled the scroll and sealed it into a storage seal on his forearm, the most secure location he had, one that was physically part of him and couldn't be removed without removing his arm. The mask's eyes dimmed and closed. The shrine settled back into its quiet dormancy. He stood in the dim light and thought. The game had just changed. Before, he'd had a secret and a deadline. Now he had a secret, a deadline, and a solution. The unraveling didn't fix everything. It didn't address Tsunade's guilt, or Dan's death, or the systemic rot of the shinobi world. But it addressed the most dangerous element, the loom itself. If the loom could be neutralized, then the primary justification for every terrible thing that had been done to protect it, including Dan's murder, evaporated. The secret became historically interesting rather than existentially threatening, and if Danzo was after the loom. The unraveling was the nuclear option. The ability to destroy the very thing Danzo was trying to acquire, permanently and irrevocably. Leverage. Real leverage. Not the desperate, single-card kind he'd had with the journal, but strategic, multi-layered leverage that gave him options. You're smiling, Kurama noted. That's usually a sign that you've had an idea that's either brilliant or catastrophic. Why can't it be both? Because the universe has a sense of irony and you give it too much material to work with. Naruto left the shrine and stepped into the afternoon sun. The village was bustling around him, teams returning from missions, vendors hawking food, children chasing each other through the streets. Normal life. The surface of a world that had no idea what was churning underneath. He needed to tell Jiraiya about the unraveling. He needed to factor it into his approach with Tsunade. And he needed to be ready for Danzo's next move, because if Root was watching him, they'd track him to the shrine eventually. And Danzo was not the kind of man who left mysteries uninvestigated. But first, he needed to eat. Strategic planning worked better on a full stomach. This was a fundamental truth that the great military minds of history had somehow failed to record, and Naruto considered it his personal mission to correct the oversight. He was halfway to Ikaraku's when he felt the change. It was subtle, a shift in the air pressure, a thickening of natural energy that Sage Mode's passive sensitivity registered like a weather vane detecting a changing wind. Someone was approaching him. Not the Root operative, that presence was still distant, maintaining surveillance. This was someone new, someone coming from the direction of the Hawkage Tower, moving fast and making no attempt to conceal their approach. Kakashi Hatake landed on the street in front of him with the casual grace of a cat that happened to weigh 90 kilos and carry 1,000 jutsu. His visible eye was curved in its perpetual crinkle, and he held a familiar orange book in one hand. "Yo," Kakashi said. "Kakashi-sensei. Don't Kakashi-sensei me like everything's normal. I just had the most interesting conversation of my career with the Hawkage, and that's saying something, because I once debriefed a mission where Guy challenged a bear to a taijutsu match and won." Kakashi tucked his book away. "Walk with me." They walked. Kakashi steered them toward the quieter residential streets, away from the market crowds. His pace was unhurried, his posture relaxed, but Naruto could feel the deliberate intent beneath the casualness. Kakashi was creating privacy through movement, a technique used by intelligence operatives who didn't trust static locations. "Tsunade called me in an hour ago," Kakashi said. "She asked me a hypothetical question. She said, if you discovered that someone you trusted had made an unforgivable choice for understandable reasons, and a person you cared about was threatening to reveal it, what would you do?" I told her it depended on the choice, the reasons, and the person. She said, "What if the choice was murder?" I said it would depend on who was murdered and why. Kakashi glanced at Naruto. His visible eye was serious now, the crinkle gone, replaced by the flat, assessing gaze of a man who'd spent a decade in Anbu. "She didn't tell me the details. She didn't name names. But she asked me to talk to you, and when I asked why, she said, because he trusts you, and I need someone he trusts to tell me if I'm making the right decision." That's a remarkable thing for a Hawkage to say. Hawkage don't ask for help. They give orders. "She's not asking for help," Naruto said. "She's looking for someone to tell her what she already knows." And what does she already know? That the status quo is over. That the secret she's been protecting doesn't protect anyone anymore. That the choices she made to keep it hidden were wrong. Not incomprehensible, not inexcusable, but wrong. And that she needs to do something about it. They walked in silence for a while. The afternoon shadows were lengthening, the sun dropping toward the Hawkage monument. A pair of genin jogged past on their way to a training ground, laughing about something. "I'm not going to ask you what the secret is," Kakashi said. "You'll tell me when you're ready, but I want to tell you something I learned during my time in Anbu, because I think it's relevant." Naruto waited. Secrets are like explosive tags. They have a shelf life. The longer they sit, the more unstable they become, and when they finally go off, the blast radius is proportional to how long they've been buried. Whatever this is, whatever Tsunade did, if it's been buried for decades, the detonation is going to be enormous. You need to think about blast containment, not just the truth itself, but how it spreads, who it reaches, and what the secondary effects will be. I know. Do you? Because I've seen what happens when village-level secrets come out uncontrolled. Sasuke learned the truth about his clan from the worst possible source in the worst possible way, and we're still dealing with the fallout. If this is even close to that scale, it's bigger. Kakashi stopped walking. He turned to face Naruto fully, and for a moment, the mask of the lazy, book-reading Jonin dropped completely, and Naruto saw the man underneath. The Anbu captain, the copy ninja, the son of the White Fang who'd learned the cost of secrets before he could shave. How much bigger? Kakashi asked quietly. Big enough that Danzo has root agents following me. Kakashi's eye widened fractionally. That single fraction told Naruto everything about how seriously Kakashi took the situation. In a career of practiced nonchalance, any visible reaction was the equivalent of someone else screaming. How many? One that I can detect. There might be others. Kurama flagged the first one yesterday morning. Root surveillance on a Konoha shinobi within the village walls. That's a direct violation of the charter agreement. Kakashi's voice was calm, but there was a hard edge beneath it. Danzo's getting bold. Danzo wants what Tsunade's hiding. He's been after it for years, from what I can piece together. My discovery just accelerated his timeline. Kakashi was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You need a team. I have Jiraiya. You need more than Jiraiya. You need people inside the village power structure who can counter Danzo's moves through official channels while you handle the strategic picture. Jiraiya is a spy. He works outside the system. You need people who work inside it. Are you volunteering?" I'm the Hawkage's former Anbu operative and the Jonin commander's most trusted field agent. If you're going up against Danzo, having me in your corner isn't just useful, it's structurally necessary. Danzo operates through bureaucracy as much as through root. You need someone who knows the bureaucracy. Naruto looked at his former teacher. Kakashi gazed back, steady and certain, the orange book nowhere in sight. Thank you, Kakashi-sensei. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when we get through this without a civil war. He pulled out his book again, flipping it open with practiced ease, the mask sliding back into place. I'll start mapping Danzo's current council alliances. He's been building support for years, favors, leverage, information control. If we're going to counter him, I need to know who he owns and who's still independent. 3 days, Naruto said. Sakura gave me 3 days before she starts digging on her own. I'd rather bring her in before that. Agreed. Sakura's too smart to keep in the dark. She'll figure it out anyway, and it's better to have her inside the tent. They parted at a street corner, Kakashi heading toward the administrative district, Naruto toward his apartment. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples, and the village was shifting into its evening mode, lanterns lighting, restaurants opening, the day's energy settling into something quieter. Naruto walked home with the journal in his jacket, and the unraveling sealed into his arm, and the beginnings of something that felt like a plan taking shape in his mind. It wasn't complete. There were too many variables, too many unknowns. But the skeleton was there, and it was strong. He had allies, Jiraiya for intelligence and strategy, Kakashi for internal politics and operational support, Sakura soon for medical expertise and analytical power. Shizune, maybe her loyalty was fractured right now, pulled between Tsunade and her own grief. But she was fundamentally decent, and she'd land in the right place eventually. He had tools. The journal as evidence, the unraveling as a countermeasure, his own growing understanding of the political landscape. And he had something else, something less tangible but no less real. He had the clarity of someone who'd seen the worst of the system and decided, not in a moment of rage but in a moment of calm, to change it. Not destroy it, not burn it down, change it. From the inside, brick by brick, truth by truth, until the foundations were clean enough to build something worth living in. You're thinking in metaphors, Kurama said. That's Jiraiya's influence. He's turned you into a narrator. Shut up, Kurama. Just an observation. Naruto climbed the stairs to his apartment. He was reaching for the door when his hand stopped. The perimeter seals were intact. Nothing visible was wrong. But the natural energy around the door felt different, displaced in a way that was almost, but not quite, imperceptible. Someone had stood here, recently. Not long enough to trigger the seals, not close enough to breach the perimeter, just stood observing, measuring, learning the seal layout so they could bypass it later. Root. Naruto's eyes hardened. He opened the door, stepped inside, and reset the perimeters with a new configuration, different trigger points, different response protocols. Then he sat on his bed and looked at the ceiling and made a decision. Tomorrow, he'd start playing offense, because defense was fine. Defense kept you alive. But Naruto Uzumaki had never won a single fight in his life by playing defense, and he wasn't about to start now. The moonlight shifted across his ceiling, and the village slept, and beneath the surface of everything, the pieces continued to move. 4 days left. Chapter 3. Roots in the dark. Naruto woke to the smell of smoke, not fire smoke, incense. Thin, astringent, the kind used in Root's sensory suppression protocols. Kurama caught it before Naruto's conscious mind did, and the fox's warning hit him like a slap of ice water against the inside of his skull. 2 of them. Roof, directly above your bedroom. Naruto didn't move. He kept his breathing slow and even, the rhythm of sleep, while his senses expanded outward. Kurama was right. 2 chakra signatures, both suppressed to near zero, both positioned on the roof tiles above him with the careful stillness of people who did this for a living. The incense was drifting through the ventilation gap between the roof and the ceiling, a standard Root technique for dulling a target's senses before infiltration. It wouldn't work on him. Kurama's chakra burned through chemical agents like fire through paper. But the fact that they were trying it meant they were escalating. Yesterday was observation. Today was preparation. Tomorrow would be the approach, unless he changed the timeline. Naruto sat up in bed, stretched loudly, and said in a clear voice, "You know, if you're going to sit on my roof at 4 in the morning, you could at least bring breakfast." Silence, the kind of silence that had a quality of surprise in it. "I can feel you up there, 2 of you. The incense is a nice touch, but it doesn't work on Jinchuriki. Kurama metabolizes it faster than you can pump it in." He stood, walked to the window, and opened it. Cool pre-dawn air flooded the room, carrying the incense away. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to go back to Danzo and tell him that if he wants to talk to me, he can do it in person. Like a human being. I'll be at Training Ground 44 at noon. He knows where that is." He waited. The 2 signatures on the roof remained motionless for exactly 4 seconds, long enough to process, short enough to maintain discipline, and then dissolved, moving away across the rooftops with that boneless, liquid speed that Root operatives used when they weren't pretending to be invisible. "Bold," Kurama said. "You told me to confront him." "I suggested it as one of several options. You've turned it into a dinner invitation. Lunch invitation. Noon. Naruto, Danzo Shimura has been manipulating shinobi politics since before your father was born. He will not come to this meeting to negotiate. He will come to assess you, find your weaknesses, and determine the most efficient way to take what he wants." "Good. Then I'll assess him right back." Naruto dressed and ate and checked his seals. The journal was secure. The unraveling was sealed in his forearm. His shadow clone network, 3 clones distributed around the village in civilian disguises, reported no unusual activity overnight beyond the 2 Root agents on his roof. He had 8 hours until noon. He used them. First stop was Jiraiya's inn. The old man was awake. Naruto suspected he hadn't slept either, based on the number of empty teacups on his desk, and the intelligence reports spread across every horizontal surface. "Danzo's been busy," Jiraiya said without preamble when Naruto walked in. "My contacts inside the council administrative office say he's filed 3 motions in the last 48 hours. 1 to expand Root's operational authority within village borders, currently held up in committee. 1 to establish a special security review of the Hawkage's classified archives, also in committee, but gaining support. And 1 to formally request a medical examination of Tsunade's fitness for office, citing concerns about chronic substance abuse and its effects on decision-making capacity. He's building a case to unseat her. He's building a case to replace her. There's a difference. He doesn't just want Tsunade out, he wants himself in. And if he controls the Hawkage's office, He controls the Hokkage's archives, which means he controls access to any information about the forbidden loom that Tsunade might have documented. He's not going to find the loom in the archives. It's encoded in Senju biology. You need a living Senju to access it. Which is why the third motion is the most dangerous. A medical examination of the Hokkage gives him legal cover to put Tsunade in a clinical setting under his control. And if his researchers have gotten as far as I think they have with Senju genetic analysis, a thorough medical exam might give them what they need to locate and extract the loom's biological encoding. Naruto felt cold anger settle in his chest. Not the hot, explosive kind, the cold kind, the kind that sharpened rather than blurred. He's trying to turn Tsunade into a lab sample. He's trying to turn Tsunade into a resource, same thing he wants to do with the loom itself. Same thing he'd do with you if he thought he could get away with it. Jinchuriki are weapons to Danzo, bloodline users are weapons. Everything and everyone is either a weapon or an obstacle. I invited him to meet me at noon, training ground 44. Jiraiya's eyebrows rose. You what? I sent the message through his root agents. They were on my roof at 4 a.m. trying to incense-drug me. And you think he'll come? He'll come. He's been circling me for 2 days without making direct contact because he wasn't sure what I knew. Now he knows that I know he's watching. The uncertainty is costing him more than the meeting will. He'll come to get information. Jiraiya studied him. There was that look again, the one from yesterday, the mix of pride and something more complicated. You've been thinking about this all night. What's your play? I'm going to tell him about the unraveling. The silence that followed was heavy. Jiraiya's face went through several stages: surprise, calculation, concern, and finally a grudging, you might actually know what you're doing nod. You're going to tell the man who wants the loom that you have the ability to destroy it. I'm going to tell him that if he pushes this, the thing he wants will cease to exist, not hidden, not relocated, not locked behind better seals. Gone. Permanently. Erased from Senju biology like it was never there. That's a threat. That's a deterrent. There's a difference. Jiraiya leaned back. You know he'll try to take the unraveling from you. He can try. It's sealed into my arm using Uzumaki Fuinjutsu that he doesn't have the bloodline to interact with. And even if he could somehow extract it, he doesn't have the technical knowledge to deploy it. You need an Uzumaki seal master for that. And you're the last Uzumaki. Naruto smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. Funny how that works out. Jiraiya was quiet for a long moment, then he picked up a cold cup of tea, drained it, and set it down with a clink. I'll be in the area, not visible, not involved, but if things go sideways, I'll be there. I know, but they won't go sideways. Danzo is a planner. He won't attack me in broad daylight in a village where I'm a public hero. The political cost would be catastrophic. Danzo has survived catastrophic political costs before. Not from me. Naruto left the inn and made his second stop, the hospital. Sakura was in the research wing, surrounded by medical texts and looking like she'd been there all night. When she saw him, her expression sharpened. She'd been waiting for this. It's only been 1 day, she said. You said 3. Plans changed. Things are moving faster than I expected. He closed the door to her research office and leaned against it. I'm going to tell you what's going on, but first, I need to know something. If you found out that someone you admired, someone who'd taught you everything you know, had done something terrible for reasons they believed were justified, what would you do? Sakura's green eyes didn't waver. I'd want to understand why. And then I'd decide whether the reasons mattered more than the act. Even if understanding it meant you could never see them the same way again. Naruto, tell me. So he told her. He started with the journal, Dan's words, Dan's fear, Dan's love for a woman who was going to kill him. He told her about the forbidden loom, about Hashirama's legacy, about the biological architecture hidden in Senju DNA. He told her about the confrontation with Tsunade, about her admission, about the decades of guilt dressed as grief. And he told her about the unraveling Mito's failsafe, sealed in his arm, the option of last resort. Sakura listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't gasp or cry or shout. She sat in her chair with her hands folded in her lap, and she listened with the focused intensity of a surgeon being briefed before an operation, absorbing every detail, cataloging every implication. When he finished, she was quiet for a full minute. "The healing supplies," she said finally. Her voice was steady, but Naruto could see the effort it cost. She altered his coagulant paste. That would reduce the efficacy of field wound treatment by, depending on the concentration change, anywhere from 40 to 90%. If he sustained a significant laceration or penetrating wound in combat and applied the altered paste expecting full function, he would have bled out. He would have bled out. Sakura's hands tightened in her lap. "Lady Tsunade, my teacher. The woman who taught me that a medic's first duty is to preserve life. She used medicine to kill." "Yeah, I need a minute." Naruto gave her the minute. He watched her process it, watched the micro-expressions chase each other across her face like clouds in a fast wind. Shock, betrayal, anger, grief, analytical distance, and then something harder, something that looked like resolve. "Okay," she said. "What do you need from me?" "Two things. First, the forbidden loom. I have Dan's description and Mito's analysis, but I need someone with advanced medical knowledge to verify the science. Is what Dan described actually possible? Could Hashirama have encoded a biological architecture capable of cellular template rewriting into his own bloodline? Sakura's mind visibly engaged, the emotional weight shifting to make room for the intellectual challenge. Theoretically, maybe. We already know that Kekkei Genkai are heritable chakrabiology configurations. The Sharingan, the Byakugan, would release. These are all cases where specific chakra pathway structures are encoded genetically. If Hashirama understood the mechanism well enough to deliberately design and implant a new configuration into his own DNA, could he have? He was the god of shinobi. He created living forests from nothing. He built the architecture of an entire village with a single jutsu. If anyone could reverse engineer the relationship between chakra and genetics, yes, I think he could have. Can you verify it? Study the loom's theoretical framework and confirm whether it's real and viable. If you give me access to Dan's journal and Mito's notes, I can run a comparative analysis against current medical research on Kekkei Genkai heritability. It'll take a few days, but I can do it. Good. Second thing, Danzo. He's been running genetic research on senju biology through black-budget channels. If his researchers have gotten close to the loom, there'll be records. Lab notes, equipment requisitions, personnel assignments. Can you find them? Through the hospital system. Danzo's people would need medical-grade equipment for that kind of research. Genetic analysis at that level requires resources that only the hospital and the Anbu Medical Division have. If he's been siphoning equipment or personnel, there'll be a paper trail. Sakura nodded slowly. The hospital keeps detailed inventory logs. Equipment transfers, especially to outside facilities, require signed authorizations. If Danzo's been requisitioning through proxies, the signatures will trace back to council members or administrative officials he controls. She paused. This is the kind of thing that could get me in a lot of trouble. I know. If you don't want to. I didn't say I didn't want to. I said it could get me in trouble. Those are different things. She stood, pulling on her white coat with the brisk efficiency of someone who'd just been given a mission. I'll start with the inventory logs. Going back how far? 20 years, at least. 20 years of hospital inventory logs. She almost laughed. You know, when I imagined my career path, forensic accountant investigating a shadow conspiracy wasn't really on the list. Life's full of surprises. Yeah, some of them are even good. She hesitated at the door. Naruto, Lady Tsunade, is she? How is she? It was such a fundamentally Sakura question. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the anger and the shattered pedestal, she still cared. Not about the hawkage, about the person. She's scared, Naruto said. I think she's been scared for 30 years and she's just now running out of ways to hide it. Sakura nodded. Something passed across her face, not forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever, but something adjacent. Understanding, maybe. The recognition that people were complicated, that good and evil weren't always separate rooms, but sometimes the same room with the lights at different levels. She left, and Naruto stood alone in the research office for a moment, feeling the weight of all the people he was pulling into this. Each one a thread connected to the central knot, each one bearing a portion of the load. This was what leadership felt like, he realized. Not giving orders, not being the strongest, but asking people to carry something heavy and trusting them not to drop it. "You're brooding," Kurama said. "Stop. You have a meeting with the most dangerous politician in the village in 4 hours. Brood later." "I'm not brooding, I'm reflecting. They're the same thing in different lighting." The morning slid toward noon. Naruto spent the remaining hours in preparation, not physical preparation, but mental. He reviewed everything he knew about Danzo Shimura, drawing on Jiraiya's intelligence briefings, Kakashi's Anbuira insights, and his own observations. Danzo was 73 years old. He'd been a shinobi since the age of 6. He'd fought in 2 world wars, survived the Nine-Tails attack, orchestrated the Uchiha massacre through manipulation of village leadership, built Root from a small Black Ops team into a shadow army of unquestioning operatives, and maintained his grip on power through a combination of political acumen, intelligence networks, and the willingness to do what others wouldn't. He was also, and this was the part most people forgot, a patriot. Twisted, ruthless, willing to sacrifice anything and anyone, but genuinely committed to Konoha's survival and dominance. He didn't want to destroy the village. He wanted to control it, reshape it, make it invincible. His vision was dark, but it was sincere. That made him more dangerous than any simple power-hungry tyrant, because you couldn't predict his moves using greed alone. You had to understand his ideology. Naruto understood it. He disagreed with every atom of it, but he understood it. Training Ground 44, the Forest of Death, loomed at the edge of the village like a bad memory. The massive trees rose behind the chain-link perimeter fence, their canopy so dense that the ground beneath existed in permanent twilight. Naruto had history with this place: the Chunin exams, Orochimaru's attack, the curse mark on Sasuke. It wasn't a place anyone came voluntarily, which was exactly why he'd chosen it. No civilians, no casual observers, no chance of collateral damage if things went wrong. Just 2 people talking in the shadows of trees older than the village itself. Naruto entered through the main gate and walked to a clearing about 300 meters in. A natural amphitheater formed by the root systems of 4 massive trees, their trunks rising like pillars around a flat, mossy floor. Shafts of muted light filtered through the canopy, giving the space a cathedral quality. He sat on a root and waited. At noon exactly, Danzo appeared. He didn't arrive the way most shinobi did, no dramatic entrance, no flash of speed or displacement of air. He simply walked into the clearing from the eastern tree line, his cane tapping against exposed roots with a measured, unhurried rhythm. He wore his usual attire, dark robes, bandaged arm, bandaged eye. Moving with the deliberate economy of someone who'd learned to compensate for a body that didn't work the way it used to. He was alone. At least, he appeared to be alone. Naruto's passive sage sensing detected 2 root operatives in the trees approximately 50 meters out. Far enough to be out of immediate combat range, close enough to intervene if their master signaled. Danzo stopped at the edge of the clearing and regarded Naruto with his single visible eye. The eye was dark, sharp, undimmed by age. Whatever else had deteriorated in that old body, the mind behind that eye was still a precision instrument. "Naruto Uzumaki," Danzo said. His voice was dry and flat, like paper scraping against stone. "You requested this meeting?" "I did. Thanks for coming." "I came because your message was delivered through my operatives, which means you detected them, which means your sensory capabilities exceed current intelligence estimates. That is worth a personal assessment." Danzo moved into the clearing with his slow, cane-assisted gait and stopped roughly 10 meters away, a conversational distance. Also, Naruto noted, an optimal distance for mid-range jutsu deployment. "You are either very brave or very foolish to invite me here alone." "I'm not alone." "You've got 2 root agents in the trees, Jirei is somewhere in the perimeter. Don't look for him. You won't find him. And Kurama's in my head, which technically makes this a party. Danzo's eye narrowed by a fraction. You're being remarkably transparent. I'm an open book. Always have been. It's one of my better qualities. Openness is not a quality. It is a vulnerability. Depends on how you use it. Naruto leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Let's skip the sparring, Lord Danzo. You know something happened between me and the Hokage. Your people caught fragments of our conversation. You've been running surveillance on me ever since, trying to figure out what I found and how to get it. You've filed 3 council motions in 48 hours trying to undermine Tsunade's position. You want the forbidden loom of creation, and you think that whatever's happening between me and Tsunade might be your way to get it. The clearing went very quiet. Even the ambient sounds of the forest, insects, birds, the rustle of leaves, seemed to dampen, as if the trees themselves were listening. Danzo's expression didn't change. That was impressive, Naruto thought. Most people, confronted with having their entire strategic position laid bare in 2 sentences, would show something. Danzo showed nothing. His face was a mask made of skin. You know about the loom, Danzo said. Not a question, a recalibration. I know about the loom, the senju encoding, the biological architecture, all of it. I also know you've been running black-budget genetic research trying to crack it from the outside. How close are you? Close enough. Not close enough, or you wouldn't be here. Something shifted in Danzo's eye. Not anger, closer to interest. The sharp, clinical interest of a man who just discovered that a pawn on the board was actually a knight. What do you want, Uzumaki? I want you to stop. Stop what? Everything, the council motions, the surveillance, the genetic research. The plan to use Tsunade as a lab sample, all of it. And why would I do that? Because if you don't, I will destroy the loom. The word destroy landed in the clearing with physical weight. Danzo's cane stopped its rhythmic tapping. For the first time in the conversation, something moved behind his eye, a flash of something hot and uncontrolled that was gone almost before Naruto registered it. That's not possible, Danzo said. The loom is encoded in senju biology. You can't destroy biological encoding without destroying the host. You can if you have the unraveling. Naruto raised his left forearm, the one carrying Mito's sealed technique. Mito Uzumaki, Hashirama's wife, the greatest seal master of her generation, designed a countermeasure. A sealing array that can permanently erase the looms encoding from a living senju without harming them. She hid it in the Uzumaki mask shrine in Konoha, accessible only to someone with Uzumaki blood. I accessed it yesterday. Danzo stared at his arm. Naruto could practically hear the calculations running behind that dark eye, probability assessments, verification protocols, risk matrices. Could the boy be bluffing? Possible, but the specificity of the claim, Mito Uzumaki, the mask shrine, Uzumaki blood requirement, suggested genuine knowledge. Could the countermeasure be fake, a decoy left by Mito to discourage exactly this scenario? Possible, but Mito's reputation for precision and thoroughness argued against it. You're telling me, Danzo said slowly, that you have the ability to permanently eliminate the most strategically valuable biological asset in the shinobi world. Yes, and you would use it, if you force my hand. The loom shouldn't exist, not in its current form, not as a secret weapon hidden in one clan's blood. It should never have been created. But since it was, and since people are willing to kill for it, have already killed for it, the safest option might be to take it off the table entirely. The safest option for whom? Danzo's voice had an edge now. Not loud, Danzo never got loud, but sharp, like a blade being drawn from a sheath. For the village, for the world, you speak of safety as if it's a universal good. It's not. Safety for one village means vulnerability for another. The loom is the key to Konoha's permanent security. With it, we could create a generation of shinobi that no other nation could match. We could end the cycle of war, not through treaties and handshakes, but through strength so absolute that resistance becomes unthinkable. You mean dominance. I mean peace. Those aren't the same thing. They are. Every peace in history has been enforced by the strongest party. The first Hokage created peace by being stronger than everyone else. The fourth Hokage maintained peace by being feared. Peace is not a state of harmony. It is a state of controlled imbalance. And the loom tips that balance permanently in our favor. Naruto looked at him, really looked, past the bandages and the robes and the political mask, at the man underneath. And he saw, with a clarity that surprised him, that Danzo believed every word he was saying. This wasn't propaganda. This wasn't manipulation. This was a worldview, deeply held and internally consistent, built on decades of experience and reinforced by every war, every betrayal, every failure of diplomacy that Danzo had witnessed. It was also wrong. Fundamentally, catastrophically wrong. But it was sincere, and that sincerity was what made it dangerous. The first Hokage created peace by reaching out his hand to his enemy, Naruto said. Hashirama didn't conquer Madara, he convinced him. And when that peace fell apart, it wasn't because Hashirama was too weak. It was because people like you, people who believed that strength was the only guarantee, undermined the trust that peace requires. Trust is a luxury. Security is a necessity. Trust is security. You just don't see it because you've never experienced it. Something flickered in Danzo's eye. Not the sharp, calculating flicker from before, something older, deeper, buried under decades of scar tissue. For just a moment, Naruto thought he saw the ghost of a boy who might have believed in trust once, before the world beat it out of him. Then it was gone, and Danzo was Danzo again, cold and certain and as immovable as a mountain. "You're naive," Danzo said, "and you're afraid. We can trade insults all day, or we can deal with reality. Here's reality. I have the unraveling. You can't take it from me, it's sealed in my body using Uzumaki Fuinjutsu that requires my bloodline to access. Even if you killed me, the seal would collapse and the technique would be lost. So your options are limited. My options are never limited. Your options regarding the loom are, you can keep pushing surveillance, council motions, genetic research, all of it, and I deploy the unraveling on Tsunade, erasing the loom's encoding from the last pure senju in the world. The weapon you've spent 20 years trying to acquire ceases to exist, or you can back off, withdraw your motions, pull your operatives, and shut down the research. In exchange, I don't destroy the loom. You'd preserve it, after everything you've said about secrets and systemic rot. I'd work with Tsunade, and with the village leadership, minus you, to determine the loom's future responsibly. Maybe that means destruction. Maybe it means controlled research with full transparency and international oversight. Maybe it means something else entirely. But it'll be decided through a legitimate process, not seized by one man and weaponized. Danzo was quiet for a long time. The forest breathed around them, vast, ancient, indifferent to human politics. Somewhere in the canopy, a bird called sharp and lonely. You realize, Danzo said, that if I agree to this, I could simply resume my efforts later. Agreements with no enforcement mechanism are worthless. The unraveling doesn't expire. As long as I'm alive and carrying it, the threat stands, and I'm very hard to kill. Everyone is killable, true. But killing me would release the Ninetales, which would destroy the village you claim to love, so add that to your calculation. Another silence. Longer this time. You've thought this through, Danzo said, and there was something in his voice that might, in a different man, have been respect. In Danzo, it came across as a reassessment of threat level. I've been thinking about it since I read Dan Cato's journal. Danzo's eye sharpened. You have the journal. I have the journal, copies of the journal, and testimony from the Hokage herself confirming its contents. If anything happens to me, the information distributes automatically to every major news outlet, every village leader, and every member of the Fire Daimyo's court. Your name comes up 20 years of illegal genetic research on a Konoha citizen's bloodline. I imagine the daimyo would find that interesting. You're bluffing. Try me. They stared at each other across the mossy clearing. 10 meters of space and approximately a century of philosophical disagreement between them. Naruto could feel Kurama's presence, coiled and ready, the fox's chakra humming at the edge of his awareness like a drawn bow. He could feel the root operatives in the trees, tense and waiting for a signal. He could feel Jiraiya somewhere in the perimeter, masked and watchful. And he could feel Danzo thinking. The old man's chakra was so suppressed, it was barely detectable, but the tiny fluctuations in it told a story, calculation, recalculation, the rapid processing of a mind that had never encountered this particular equation before. Danzo was used to dealing with people who were either weaker than him, and thus controllable, or stronger than him, and thus avoidable. Naruto was something else, an equal who didn't play by his rules. One condition, Danzo said, I'm listening. Whatever process you establish for the loom's future, this responsible determination you're proposing, I want a seat at the table. Not as an outsider, not as an adversary, as a participant with equal voice. Naruto considered this. His instinct screamed no. Danzo at the table was Danzo with influence, and Danzo with influence was Danzo with a knife under the tablecloth. But refusing entirely would guarantee his opposition, and contained opposition was better than uncontained opposition. You get a seat, Naruto said. But not a veto. Your voice carries the same weight as everyone else's, no more, no less. And who determines everyone else? We do. Together. The Hokage, the council, representatives from the clans, and yes, you, a legitimate process with legitimate participants. Danzo's cane resumed its tapping, slow, rhythmic, the pace of a man who was deciding whether to fold his hand or raise the stakes. The tapping went on for 30 seconds that felt like 30 minutes. Acceptable, Danzo said. Provisionally is fine. We're all provisional right now. Danzo turned to leave. He'd taken 3 steps when he stopped, his back to Naruto, and spoke without turning around. Your father made this mistake. What mistake? Believing that the world could be reshaped through conviction rather than control. He was the strongest Hokage since Hashirama, and he died at 24 because he chose sacrifice over pragmatism. My father saved the village. Your father created a weapon, and then died before he could see what would be done with it. Minato Namikaze was a genius and a fool, and the fact that his son appears to be the same is either poetry or tragedy. I haven't decided which. Danzo walked into the tree line and vanished. His root operatives followed, their chakra signatures dissolving into the forest's background noise like stones sinking into dark water. Naruto sat alone in the clearing. The adrenaline was draining now, leaving him wrung out and slightly shaky, the way he always felt after a confrontation that could have gone catastrophically wrong but didn't. He'll honor the agreement, Kurama said. For now, Danzo is a pragmatist above all else. He'll take the seat at the table and use it to maneuver. You've bought time, not peace. Time is what I needed. How much time? Enough to deal with Tsunade, enough to understand the loom, enough to build a framework that's stronger than one old man's ambition. Naruto stood and stretched, feeling his muscles protest. Did you catch that last thing he said? About my father? I did. He's wrong about Dad, but he's not wrong about everything. The world doesn't change just because you want it to. You have to build the structure that makes change possible, and then you have to defend it against the people who want to tear it down. That's unusually strategic for you. I had a good teacher. 2, actually. He paused. 3, if I count you. Don't get sentimental. I have a reputation. Naruto smiled, the first genuine smile he'd felt since this whole thing began, and walked out of the forest of death into the afternoon sun. He found Kakashi waiting for him at the perimeter gate, leaning against the fence with his book out, looking for all the world like a man who just happened to be reading in the exact spot where Naruto would emerge. How'd it go? Kakashi asked without looking up. Better than expected. He agreed to back off, provisionally. Provisionally, that's Danzo's favorite word. It means until I find a better option. Kakashi flipped a page. While you were playing diplomat with the most dangerous man in Konoha, I've been doing something considerably less exciting, but possibly more useful. I mapped Danzo's council alliances. He pulled a folded paper from his vest and handed it to Naruto. It was a diagram, names connected by lines, color-coded, annotated in Kakashi's neat handwriting. It looked like a spider web, and Danzo was the spider. 6 council members are firmly in his camp, the ones marked in red. They'll vote however he tells them. 4 are independent, marked in blue. They can be swayed but aren't owned. The remaining 3, including Hamura and Koharu, are technically allied with Danzo but have their own agendas. They'll support him as long as it serves their interests and turn on him the moment it doesn't. And the clan heads? Mixed. Hayashi Hyuga is sympathetic to Danzo's security-first worldview, but won't openly support root expansion. The Hyuga have their own bloodline secrets and don't want to set a precedent. Shikaku Nara is the smartest person on the council and currently undeclared. If you can get Shikaku on your side, you get the analytical backbone of the village's strategic apparatus. How do I get Shikaku? You give him the truth. Shikaku doesn't respond to emotion or ideology. He responds to data. Give him the facts, let him run the analysis, and trust that his conclusion will be the correct one, because it usually is. Naruto pocketed the diagram. I need to see Tsunade. Now, it's been 2 days of her week. She's had time to panic, time to drink, and time to start thinking. If I know her, and I do, she's written something. A plan, a proposal, a confession, something. She's a woman of action even when the action terrifies her. I need to see where her head is. Want backup. Not for this. This is between me and her. Kakashi nodded. His eye crinkled, and for a moment, the lazy teacher act was completely transparent. Underneath, it was a man who was proud of his student and worried about him in equal measure, and the worry was losing. You've changed, Kakashi said. In the last 2 days, you've changed. Not the fundamentals, you're still you, but there's something sharper now, more focused. I think I finally figured out what I'm supposed to be doing, being Hokage. Not yet. Being the person who makes the Hokage's chair worth sitting in. He left Kakashi at the gate and headed for the Hokage Tower. The afternoon was bright and warm, the village humming around him with its usual energy. He passed civilians and shinobi, vendors and children. Normal life, carrying on, unaware of the tectonic shifts happening beneath the surface. The Hokage Tower's lobby was quiet. The administrative staff were in the mid-afternoon lull, shuffling papers and drinking tea. Naruto took the stairs 2 at a time, passed the Anbu guards with a nod, and stopped outside Tsunade's office door. He knocked. Come in. Her voice was steady. More controlled than it had been 2 nights ago, Naruto entered. The office looked different, cleaner, more organized. The sake bottles were gone. The stacks of neglected paperwork had been reduced. And Tsunade sat behind her desk with her hands folded in front of her, looking at him with eyes that were clear. Not just clear of alcohol, clear of something else. The desperate, cornered look from the night of the confrontation was gone. In its place was something more complex, still afraid, still pained, but present in a way that Tsunade hadn't been in years. Maybe decades. You're sober, Naruto said. First time in a while. He sat down across from her. The same chairs, the same desk, the same room where everything had blown apart 2 nights ago. But the energy was different, less volatile, more measured. You met with Danzo, Tsunade said. Naruto raised an eyebrow. How did you? I'm the Hokage. I have my own intelligence network. It's smaller than Danzo's and less ethically compromised, but it exists. She paused. My people tell me you threatened to destroy the Forbidden Loom. I told him I could, and I would if he pushed. There's a difference. The unraveling. You know about it. Tsunade's expression flickered. Mito mentioned it to me once. When I was young, before the war, before everything. She said, if the day ever comes when the loom becomes more dangerous as a secret than it would be as public knowledge, there is a way to end it. I didn't understand at the time. Later, after Dan, after everything, I tried to find it. I searched the compound, the archives, the shrine. I couldn't access it. The Uzumaki seals rejected me. Because you're not in Uzumaki. Because I'm not in Uzumaki. She looked at him, and there was something in her gaze that was almost amusement, dark, tired, but real. Mito designed her failsafe so that only an Uzumaki could deploy it. She knew that a Senju, even a well-intentioned one, might choose preservation over destruction. Bloodline loyalty. The same instinct that made me, she stopped. That made you kill Dan, Naruto finished. Yes. She didn't flinch, not this time. That made me kill Dan. The admission hung in the air between them, heavy but no longer explosive. 2 nights ago, those words had been a bomb. Now they were a brick, part of a foundation being built, deliberately and painfully, one truth at a time. I've been writing, Tsunade said. She reached into her desk, the top drawer, not the bottom, nothing hidden, and pulled out a scroll. A proposal. For how to address the loom, the secret, and what I did. All of it. She placed the scroll on the desk between them. I want you to read it, and then I want you to tear it apart. Tell me everything that's wrong with it, everything that's insufficient, everything that doesn't go far enough. Don't be kind, don't be polite, be honest. Naruto reached for the scroll. He unrolled it and began to read. The proposal was detailed and methodical, Tsunade's strategic mind at full power, stripped of the fog of alcohol and the paralysis of denial. It laid out a 3-phase plan. Phase 1, disclosure. A controlled revelation of the loom's existence to a carefully selected group, the clan heads, the council, and a representative panel from each allied village. Not the full technical details, but the broad strokes. The Senju bloodline contains an encoded biological capability. It has been hidden for generations, and the current Hokage is recommending a transparent process to determine its future. Phase 2, assessment. A joint research committee, including medical experts from multiple villages, SEAL specialists, and independent oversight, to study the loom, understand its capabilities and risks, and produce a comprehensive analysis. This would include Sakura, as Tsunade's most advanced student, representatives from the Hyuga and Nara clans for their bloodline and analytical expertise, and international participants from Sand, Cloud, and potentially others. Phase 3, decision. Based on the committee's findings, a multi-village summit to decide the loom's fate. Options would include preservation under international oversight, controlled research with strict protocols, partial or full deployment of the unraveling, or some combination. Appended to the proposal was a personal statement. Naruto's eyes slowed as he reached it. I, Tsunade Senju, 5th Hokage of Konohagakure, confessed to the murder of Dan Kato, Special Jonin, during the Second Shinobi World War. I altered his medical supplies to reduce the efficacy of his field wound treatment, knowing that this would likely result in his death in combat. I did this to prevent his planned disclosure of the forbidden loom of creation to village leadership, which I believed would endanger the Senju bloodline and destabilize the existing power structure. I do not ask for forgiveness. I do not claim justification. I present this confession as a matter of record, to be evaluated by whatever authority is deemed appropriate. I am prepared to accept the consequences of my actions, up to and including removal from office, criminal prosecution, and any other measures deemed just. I owe this truth to Dan Kato, to Shizune, to the village I swore to protect, and to Naruto Uzumaki, who had the courage to demand it. Naruto set the scroll down. He looked at Tsunade. She was watching him with an expression he'd never seen on her face before. Not the bravado, not the authority, not the grief mask she wore like a second skin. This was something raw and undefended, the face of a woman who'd just handed someone the knife and shown them where to cut. You'd really do this, he said. Step down, face prosecution, if that's what's required. It might end you politically, personally. It ended me 31 years ago. Everything since then has been borrowed time. She straightened in her chair. The proposal isn't perfect, I know that. There are gaps, security concerns during the disclosure phase, the risk of information leaks, the question of how to manage Danzo's participation without giving him leverage. I need help filling those gaps. From you, from Jiraiya, from Kakashi and Sakura and anyone else you trust. Shizune. Tsunade's composure faltered for the first time. Shizune won't speak to me. She will. Give her time. I've given her 31 years of lies. Time isn't the issue. Then give her the truth, which you've started doing. The rest comes after. Naruto rolled the scroll back up and held it. This is good. Not perfect, you're right about the gaps, but it's a real start. A genuine first step. But the personal statement needs to be public, not just internal, not just the council and the clan heads. The village needs to know, the whole village. Because if you keep it to the power structure, it becomes another managed secret, another piece of information that the elite hold over the regular people. And that's the exact pattern we're trying to break. Tsunade paled. You want me to stand in front of the village and confess to murder. I want you to stand in front of the village and tell the truth. For the first time in 31 years, yeah, it'll be the hardest thing you've ever done. Yeah, the fallout will be massive. But the alternative is more managed truth, more controlled information, more of the same system that created this mess in the first place. It could destroy public faith in the Hokage's office, or it could rebuild it. People aren't stupid. They know their leaders make hard choices. What they can't accept, what nobody should accept, is leaders who make hard choices and then lie about it forever. You tell the truth, you face the consequences, and you let the village decide how to respond. That's what trust looks like. Tsunade stared at him. The afternoon light through the windows caught the edge of her face, and for a moment, just a moment, the transformation jutsu flickered again. A hairline crack showing age beneath the youth. She caught it and reinforced it, but they both knew he'd seen. When did you become this? She asked quietly. Become what? This, whatever this is. This person who walks into my office and tells me how to run a village and I listen. I've always been this person. You just couldn't hear me over the shouting. Tsunade almost smiled. It was the ghost of a smile, haunted and fragile and real. Dan would have liked you. I would have liked him. They sat with that for a moment, the weight of a man neither of them had known at the same time, connecting them through absence and consequence. 3 days, Naruto said. I had originally said a week, but things are moving faster than I expected. Danzo's provisionally agreed to back off, but provisional means temporary. Sakura's running an analysis on the loom's science and digging into Danzo's black-budget research. Kakashi's mapping the political landscape. Jiraiya's running intelligence. We have a window, right now, this moment, where the pieces are aligned enough to act. If we wait too long, the alignment shifts. 3 days to prepare a public disclosure of the most dangerous secret in the shinobi world and my personal confession to murder. I didn't say it would be easy. You never do. Tsunade pulled the scroll back across the desk and uncapped a pen. Stay, help me revise this. We'll work through the gaps together. Naruto pulled his chair closer to the desk. Through the windows, the afternoon sun continued its slow descent, painting the village in gold. Below, Konoha carried on, missions and meals and arguments and laughter, the daily business of being alive. None of them knew what was coming. None of them knew that the ground beneath their feet was about to shift, but it would shift gently if Naruto had anything to say about it. Not an earthquake. A renovation. Tearing out the rotten foundations and replacing them with something that could actually bear weight. They worked until evening, marking up the scroll with additions, revisions, and contingency plans. Tsunade was sharp when she was sober, frighteningly sharp, her strategic mind cutting through problems with surgical precision. Naruto brought the outside perspective, the political naivety that was actually clarity because it wasn't trapped in decades of precedent and assumption. Together, they built something that felt, for the first time, like it might actually work. When Naruto finally left the tower, the stars were out. He walked home through quiet streets, past closed shops and sleeping houses, the village at rest. 3 days, Kurama said. 3 days. You know this will change everything? That's the point. And you're ready for that. The world after this disclosure will not be kind. People will be angry. Scared, the other villages will posture and threaten. Danzo will look for cracks. And Tsunade will stand up and tell the truth, and then we'll deal with whatever comes next, together. Kurama was quiet for a moment. Together, you keep using that word, as if it means something in a world built on secrets and betrayal. It does mean something, that's the whole point. Naruto reached his apartment, checked his seals, and went inside. The night settled around him, deep and quiet. 3 days. 72 hours to prepare for a moment that would reshape the shinobi world. He wasn't afraid. Not of the disclosure, not of the consequences, not of Danzo or the other villages, or the fury of a public confronted with uncomfortable truths. He was afraid of one thing only, that it wouldn't be enough. That the rot went deeper than he knew, that the system would absorb the shock and reform around the same old patterns, that 30 years from now some other kid would find some other journal and the whole cycle would repeat. But fear and inaction were different things. And Naruto Uzumaki had never, not once in his entire life, chosen an action. He slept. And for the first time since he'd opened that locked drawer, his sleep was dreamless and deep. 3 days. Chapter 4. The unraveling the first of the 3 days began with rain. It came in hard and sudden, the way Konoha rain always did in late spring. No gradual buildup, no gentle patter, just a wall of water dropping out of a sky that had been clear 10 minutes before. Naruto stood at his kitchen window watching it hammer the rooftops while he ate cold rice and leftover fish, and he thought about timing. Rain was good. Rain kept people indoors, limited visibility, dampened sound. Rain made surveillance harder. And rain gave the village a closed, intimate quality that would work in their favor when the time came for Tsunade's disclosure. People turned inward during rain, became reflective, more willing to sit and listen rather than react. You're reading weather patterns for tactical advantage. Kurama observed. Jiraiya would be proud. Jiraiya would tell me I'm overthinking it and then spend 3 hours explaining why I'm not overthinking it enough. He finished eating, dressed in mission-ready gear. Not because he expected combat, but because the weight of the flak jacket and the familiar press of holstered kunai against his thighs helped him think, and headed out into the downpour. His first meeting of the day was with Shikaku Nara. Kakashi had arranged it through back channels, framing it as a strategic consultation rather than a political recruitment. Shikaku was the Jonin commander, the village's chief strategist, and arguably the most dangerous mind in Konoha. Not because of his combat abilities, though those were formidable, but because Shikaku Nara saw patterns the way other people saw colors. Automatically, intuitively, and completely. Getting Shikaku on board wasn't optional. It was structural. Without the Jonin commander's support, any political action Naruto took would lack the institutional legitimacy needed to survive Danzo's counterattack. And Danzo would counterattack. Provisional agreements were tissue paper to a man who'd built his entire career on contingency plans. Shikaku's office was in the Jonin headquarters, a functional, undecorated room that smelled like cigarette smoke and shogi pieces. The man himself sat behind a desk covered in tactical maps, a cigarette burning in a clay ashtray, his scarred face carrying the permanently tired expression of someone who saw too many moves ahead and was exhausted by all of them. Uzumaki, Shikaku said. Sit down. Kakashi tells me you have something I need to hear. Naruto sat. He'd thought carefully about how to approach this conversation. Shikaku didn't respond to emotion, ideology, or charisma. He responded to information and logic, so Naruto gave him both. He laid out the situation in clean, sequential order. Dan's journal, the forbidden loom, Tsunade's confession, the unraveling, Danzo's 20-year research program, the provisional agreement, the 3-day timeline. Shikaku listened without interrupting. He smoked his cigarette down to the filter, lit another, and smoked that one halfway down. His eyes never left Naruto's face, and behind them, Naruto could almost see the calculations running, probabilities branching into decision trees branching into consequence matrices. The vast, invisible architecture of a mind that processed strategic complexity the way most people processed breathing. When Naruto finished, Shikaku was quiet for a long time. Rain drummed against the window. 3 questions, Shikaku said finally. First, the loom. You have Dan's account and Mito's notes. Has the science been independently verified? Sakura's working on it. She's cross-referencing against current Kekkei Genkai research. She should have preliminary findings by tonight. Good. Second, Danzo's agreement. You've characterized it as provisional. What's your assessment of its actual shelf life? Days. Maybe a week. He agreed because I presented a credible threat. The unraveling, that makes the loom worthless if he pushes too hard. But Danzo will be looking for a way around the threat. A way to acquire the loom before I can destroy it, or a way to neutralize me without triggering the unraveling's deployment. So the agreement is a ceasefire, not a peace? Exactly. Third question. Shikaku leaned back, cigarette between his fingers, smoke curling toward the ceiling. Why are you telling me this? Because you're the Jonin commander. Because you have the authority and the institutional standing to legitimize Tsunade's disclosure process. Because Danzo has 6 council members in his pocket, and I need the military leadership as a counterweight. And because you're the smartest person I have access to who doesn't already have a stake in the outcome. Everyone has a stake in this outcome. You know what I mean. You're not emotionally invested. You'll see it clearly. Shikaku almost smiled. It was a micro-expression there and gone, but Naruto caught it. You've done your homework on me. Kakashi helped. Kakashi's a good analyst. Lazy, but good. Shikaku stubbed out his cigarette and immediately lit a third. Here's what I see. You've constructed a remarkably competent strategic position for someone your age. The unraveling gives you a credible deterrent against Danzo. The journal gives you leverage over Tsunade. The alliance with Jiraiya and Kakashi gives you operational capability. And Tsunade's willingness to confess gives you a path to legitimacy. But you're running a 3-day timeline against opponents who think in decades. Danzo has been building his power base for 40 years. He's not going to be outmaneuvered by a 16-year-old in 72 hours, no matter how talented that 16-year-old is. He'll comply with your agreement on the surface while working to undermine it underneath. He'll use the seat at the table you offered him to gather intelligence on the loom's technical specifics, and he'll have a fallback plan, probably several, for scenarios where the disclosure goes sideways. I know. That's why I need you. I can handle the strategic picture, but I can't manage the institutional chess game at the same time. I need someone who can see Danzo's political moves before he makes them and position counter-moves through official channels. Shikaku studied him through the cigarette smoke. The assessment was thorough. Naruto could feel it. The weight of a master strategist evaluating not just his words but his posture, his confidence, his emotional stability. The 1,000 microsignals that betrayed whether a person was operating from strength or desperation. You know what this reminds me of, Shikaku said. What? Shogi. The end-game phase when the board is almost clear and every piece matters. You've been playing a strong opening, aggressive, direct, high risk but high reward. But the endgame is where games are won or lost, and the endgame requires patience, something you're not known for. I'm working on it. Work faster. Shikaku reached into his desk and pulled out a shogi board, battered, well-used, the pieces worn smooth from thousands of games. He set it on the desk between them. I'm in, but we're going to wargame this before we execute. Every scenario, every counter-move, every contingency. If we're going to beat Danzo at institutional chess, we need to have played the game 3 times before he sits down at the board. They spent 2 hours over the shogi board. Not playing shogi, using the pieces as stand-ins for the political actors, the board as a map of Konoha's power structure. Shikaku walked Naruto through Danzo's likely responses to the disclosure, layer by layer, each scenario branching into sub-scenarios like the roots of a tree. If the disclosure went well and public opinion supported Tsunade, Danzo would pivot to questioning the disclosure process itself, arguing that it was rushed, incomplete, or strategically reckless. He'd use his council allies to demand a more thorough review, buying time to advance his own agenda. If the disclosure went poorly and public opinion turned against Tsunade, Danzo would position himself as the responsible alternative, the steady hand who could manage the crisis. He'd push for an emergency leadership transition, with himself as the logical candidate, if the other villages reacted aggressively to the loom's revelation. Danzo would argue that the disclosure endangered national security, frame Naruto and Tsunade as reckless, and use the external threat to justify expanded root authority. For each scenario, Shikaku and Naruto developed countermoves, prepositioned allies in the council, prepared public statements, contingency protocols for information management. The strategic depth was dizzying, but Naruto found that he could keep up, not at Shikaku's level, not yet, but well enough to contribute, to see the shapes of the problems even when the details blurred. You have a strategist's instincts. Shikaku said at the end of the session, sounding almost surprised. Raw, undeveloped, but there. Where did you pick that up? Battlefield experience. When you fight enough people who are trying to kill you, you start thinking about what they'll do before they do it. That's tactics. Strategy is different. Tactics is winning the fight in front of you. Strategy is choosing which fights to have. Then I'm learning strategy. Right now, from you, Shikaku grunted, it might have been approval. Go, do what you need to do today. I'll start positioning council allies for the disclosure. Choza and Inoichi will support this. They trust me, and they're the kind of leaders who'd rather deal with an uncomfortable truth than a comfortable lie. The Aburame will be cautious but fair. The Inuzuka will be loud about it but ultimately on the right side. And the Hyuga. Hayashi is the wild card. The Hyuga have their own bloodline concerns, the branch house seal, the politics of the Byakugan. A disclosure about the loom could set a precedent that forces them to confront their own secrets. Hayashi will support the process if he believes it won't turn into a broader inquiry into bloodline clan practices. He'll oppose it if he thinks it will. How do I reassure him? You don't. I do. Hayashi and I have a relationship built on 20 years of mutual respect and strategic cooperation. He'll take a meeting with me that he won't take with you. Let me handle the Hyuga. Naruto nodded. The division of labor was taking shape, each person handling the piece they were best suited for, the whole greater than the sum of its parts. This was how real change worked, he was beginning to understand. Not a single hero punching through the problem, but a network of capable people pulling in the same direction. He left the Jonin headquarters and stepped into the rain. It had eased from a downpour to a steady drizzle, the kind that could last all day. The streets were quieter than usual, fewer vendors, fewer pedestrians, the village turning inward under the gray sky. His shadow clone network checked in. Clone 1, disguised as a merchant in the market district, reported no unusual route activity. Clone 2, stationed near the hospital, reported that Sakura had arrived at the research wing at dawn and hadn't left. Clone 3, positioned near the administrative building, reported that Danzo had not been seen entering or leaving the council chambers. That last detail nagged at Naruto. Danzo was a creature of routine. He attended council sessions, met with his allies, maintained his public presence as a concerned elder statesman. If he wasn't at the council chambers, he was somewhere else, doing something he didn't want observed. He's at his base, Kurama said. Regrouping. Planning. Your meeting yesterday threw his timeline off and he needs to recalibrate. Or he's already making his move and we can't see it. Also possible, but Danzo is methodical. He doesn't rush. If he's recalibrating, we have a window. Use it. Naruto's next stop was the hospital. He found Sakura in her research office, surrounded by a fortress of medical texts, scrolls, and biochemistry charts. Her hair was pulled back in a messy knot, her white coat had ink stains on the cuffs, and she had the intense, slightly manic energy of someone who'd been awake since before dawn and was running on caffeine and intellectual momentum. Tell me you have something, Naruto said. I have everything. Sakura pulled a chair out for him and swept a pile of books off the table to make space for a large diagram she'd drawn on butcher paper. It was a schematic, a web of interconnected circles and arrows, annotated in her precise handwriting. Sit down. This is going to take a minute. How long a minute? A Sakura minute, so maybe 20, he sat. She launched into it, and despite the technical density of the material, Naruto found he could follow the broad strokes because Sakura was a natural teacher. She had Tsunade's precision but a better sense of when to simplify and when to go deep. The forbidden loom is real, she said. Not just theoretically possible real. I've confirmed it through 3 independent lines of analysis. She tapped the first cluster of circles on her diagram. Line 1, genetic architecture. I compared Dan's description of the loom's encoding structure against what we know about Kekkei Genkai heritability. Kekkei Genkai are stored in chakra-reactive genetic sequences, DNA segments that interact with the body's chakra network to produce specific abilities. The Sharingan, the Byakugan, would release. They're all variations of the same underlying mechanism. Hashirama's innovation was to take that mechanism and invert it. Invert it how? Normally, a Kekkei Genkai is a fixed expression. Your genetics produce a specific ability, and that's what you get. You can't change it, transfer it, or replicate it. The genetic code is locked. What Hashirama did was create a variable expression, a genetic framework that isn't locked to a single output, but can be reconfigured to produce different outputs depending on how it's activated. It's the difference between a key that opens one lock and a master key that opens any lock. Naruto followed. Barely, but he followed. So the loom isn't a jutsu, it's a tool. It's a platform, a biological operating system that can run different programs. If you know how to interface with it, which requires seal mastery at the Uzumaki level, according to Mito's notes, you can theoretically use it to rewrite any person's genetic template to express any Kekkei Genkai. Any Kekkei Genkai, not just wood release. Any chakra-reactive genetic expression. Wood release is the most obvious application because that's what Hashirama designed it around, but the underlying framework is general purpose. You could theoretically use it to give someone the Sharingan or the Byakugan or abilities we haven't even conceived of yet. The weight of that settled on Naruto like a physical force, not just would release, any bloodline limit. The loom wasn't a weapon. It was a rewrite button for the entire concept of shinobi hereditary power. No wonder Hashirama had sealed it. No wonder Tsunade had killed to keep it hidden. No wonder Danzo was willing to spend 20 years and untold resources trying to crack it. Line 2. Sakura continued, tapping the second cluster on her diagram. Mito's technical specifications. Her notes include detailed descriptions of the loom's encoding structure, how it's layered into the Senju genome, how it interfaces with the chakra network, how it would need to be extracted and translated by a seal master. I cross-referenced her specifications against current medical knowledge of Senju biology. Tsunade's medical records, historical data on previous Senju shinobi, and everything checks out. The encoding structure Mito described is consistent with anomalies in Senju genetic data that we've known about for years, but never explained. Anomalies, junk DNA, or what we thought was junk DNA. Every Senju we've ever genotyped has these massive sections of non-coding genetic material that don't seem to do anything. Medical researchers have been puzzling over them for decades. Now I know what they are. They're the loom, dormant, waiting for the right activation sequence. And line 3. Sakura's expression hardened. Danzo's research. She pulled a separate stack of papers from under a textbook. I found the paper trail. Equipment requisitions, personnel transfers, lab space allocations, all routed through a shell organization called the Advanced Biological Studies Initiative, which is technically a subdivision of the Konoha Science Division, but is funded entirely through discretionary council allocations that Danzo controls. How far did he get? Far enough to be terrifying. His researchers identified the encoding structure independently. They didn't have Mito's notes, so they approached it from the outside through brute force genetic analysis. They've mapped approximately 60% of the loom's architecture. They can see it, they can describe it, but they can't read it. The encoding is chakra reactive. It only becomes legible when interfaced with Uzumaki-type sealing techniques. Without an Uzumaki, they're looking at a book in a language they can't translate. So they need me, or someone like you. Which, since you're the last known Uzumaki, means you. Sakura paused. There's something else, something I found in the requisition records that doesn't fit the genetic research pattern. What? Medical equipment. Specifically, a full surgical suite's worth of equipment was transferred to the EBC facility 18 months ago. Anesthesia apparatus, hemodynamic monitors, a chakra-regulated stasis chamber. This isn't research equipment, Naruto. This is operational equipment, the kind you'd use for a procedure. What kind of procedure? The kind where you take a living subject and do something to them. Sakura's voice was flat, carefully controlled. Danzo wasn't just researching the loom, he was preparing to extract it from a living senju. The surgical suite is designed for exactly that, immobilizing a subject, suppressing their chakra, and performing an extended biological extraction under controlled conditions. The cold anger was back. Naruto felt it settle into his bones, sharp and precise. He was going to kidnap Tsunade. That's my assessment. Not immediately. He'd need to solve the Uzumaki translation problem first, but the infrastructure was being built. He was putting the pieces in place for an eventual operation to capture the Hokage, suppress her, and extract the looms encoding from her body. The fact that she might not survive the process was probably factored in as an acceptable cost. Naruto stood. He walked to the window and looked out at the rain, letting the cold anger process through him without controlling it, without suppressing it. He let it sharpen him. "Can you document all of this?" he asked. "The equipment trail, the funding sources, the connection to Danzo, bulletproof documentation that would hold up in front of the council." "I already have. 3 copies, independent storage." She paused. "Naruto, this is enough to have Danzo arrested. Conspiracy to commit assault on the Hokage, unauthorized biological research, misappropriation of village funds, root charter violations. Any one of these charges would be career-ending. All of them together. We're not arresting him." Sakura blinked. "What? Not yet." An arrest would trigger a political crisis. Danzo's council allies would circle the wagons, frame it as a power grab, turn him into a martyr. We need to present this as part of the larger disclosure. The loom, Tsunade's confession, Danzo's research, all of it at once, in a single comprehensive package that the public and the council have to deal with as a whole. If we pick off Danzo separately, we lose the narrative. You want to let a man who was building a kidnapping facility for the Hokage walk free for 2 more days. I want to let a man who was building a kidnapping facility for the Hokage dig his own grave for 2 more days. Every hour he thinks his research is still secret, he's not covering his tracks. The documentation gets stronger. Sakura stared at him. "That's cold. It's strategic. Those aren't mutually exclusive." She shook her head, but there was no real disapproval in it, more a kind of grim recognition that the situation demanded a harder calculus than either of them was naturally comfortable with. "Fine. 2 days. But if he makes any move toward operational status on that surgical suite, I'm flagging it immediately." "Agreed. Keep monitoring the requisition channels. Anything that looks like he's activating the facility, I want to know within the hour." Naruto left the hospital and headed into the rain-slicked streets. The afternoon was advancing, gray and wet, and the village had settled into the muted rhythm of a rainy day. He could feel his shadow clones maintaining their positions around the village, a distributed awareness network that fed him a low-level stream of environmental data. Clone 3, the one near the administrative building, pinged him. Something was happening. Naruto detoured toward the administrative district, moving fast, taking the rooftop route where the rain provided cover. He reached a vantage point overlooking the building's main entrance, just as a group of people emerged, council members, moving in a tight cluster, their expressions carrying the tense, guarded look of people who'd just been in a contentious meeting. Hamura Mitokado and Koharu Udatane, the 2 surviving teammates of the 3rd Hokage, The village's elder advisory council were at the center of the group. And walking beside them, his cane marking a steady rhythm on the wet stone, was Danzo. Naruto watched. Danzo was talking, not animated, never animated, but with the quiet intensity he used when making a case. Hamura was nodding. Koharu's face was a mask, but her body language leaned toward Danzo rather than away from him. He's not recalibrating, Kurama said. He's campaigning. For what? Look at who's in the group. Hamura and Koharu are the swing votes on the advisory council. Without them, Danzo can't pass emergency resolutions. With them, he can bypass the full council and act with advisory authority. He's building a coalition for something. Something could be a lot of things. An emergency session. A no-confidence motion. A mandate to investigate the Hokage's fitness for office. Any of these would complicate the disclosure timeline, create political chaos that Danzo could exploit. Naruto needed to know what was said in that meeting. He dropped from the rooftop and found Kakashi 3 blocks away, exactly where he expected to find him, leaning against a wall under an awning, reading his book, somehow bone-dry despite the rain. I know, Kakashi said before Naruto could speak. I saw them. I have a contact inside the Advisory Council's administrative staff. She owes me a favor from the Reconstruction period. Give me an hour. Kakashi disappeared, and Naruto found shelter under a tea shop's awning to wait. He ordered tea he didn't want and sat at a table near the window, watching the rain and thinking. The pieces were accelerating. Danzo was moving. Tsunade was preparing. The disclosure was 2 days away, and the political landscape was shifting beneath their feet like tectonic plates. Every hour mattered. Every conversation, every meeting, every document was a thread in a tapestry that was either going to become a masterpiece or unravel into chaos. You need to talk to Tsunade again, Kurama said. Whatever Danzo is pushing through the advisory council, she needs to know about it before it hits her desk. I know, but I also need to. A familiar chakra signature entered the tea shop. Not threatening, not hostile, but unexpected enough that Naruto's hand moved reflexively toward his kunai pouch before his conscious mind registered who it was. Shizune stood in the doorway, rain-damp and hollow-eyed, holding Taunton under one arm. She looked like she hadn't slept since their conversation at Training Ground 7. The shadows under her eyes were deep enough to hold water. I've been looking for you, she said. Sit down. She sat across from him, setting Taunton on the seat beside her. The small pig looked as tired as her owner. Shizune ordered tea with automatic politeness and then stared at the cup without drinking it. She told me everything, Shizune said. Yesterday, after you left. The loom, the encoding, Dan's discovery, the healing supplies, all of it. Naruto waited. I spent last night going through my uncle's personal effects, the ones I've carried since I was 5 years old. His headband, his chakra blade, a photograph of him and Tsunade by the river in Tanzaku Gai. Her voice was steady, but steady the way a wire is steady, taut and vibrating with tension. I've built my entire identity around his memory. Uncle Dan, the hero who died in the war. Uncle Dan, whose dream of becoming Hokage inspired Tsunade to take the hat. Uncle Dan, whose sacrifice meant something. She looked up, and her eyes were raw. And now I find out his sacrifice didn't mean anything. He didn't die for the village. He died because he was inconvenient. He died because he was right, Naruto said quietly. He saw the truth about the loom and wanted to act on it. That's not meaningless. That's exactly the kind of sacrifice that means the most. He died because the woman I've followed for 20 years poisoned him. Yes, that too. Shizune's hands wrapped around her teacup, knuckles white. I don't know what to do with that. I don't know how to hold both of those things at the same time, that Tsunade murdered my uncle, and that Tsunade has been the most important person in my life. That she taught me everything. That she held my hand when I had nightmares as a child. That she was kind, genuinely kind, even at her worst. How do you reconcile that with, you don't? Not yet, maybe not ever. Naruto leaned forward. Shizune, you don't have to reconcile it. You just have to decide what to do next. That's all any of us are doing right now, deciding the next step. What's the next step? Tsunade is planning a public disclosure. Everything, the loom, her confession, the whole truth. She's doing it in 2 days. She needs help preparing. She needs people she trusts to stand beside her when she does it. She needs me to stand beside her. That's her hope, not her expectation. She told me she doesn't expect you to forgive her. She just wants you to know that she's finally doing the thing she should have done 31 years ago. Shizyun stared at her tea, steam curled between them, thin and ghostly. My uncle wanted to change the world, she said. He died for it. And now, 31 years later, his death might actually accomplish what he intended. Is that justice or irony? In my experience, they're usually the same thing. Shizyun almost smiled. It was small, painful, and achingly genuine. You really are something, Naruto Uzumaki. I'm just a kid who opened a drawer he shouldn't have. No, you're not. Not anymore. She picked up her tea and finally drank. I'll be there. For the disclosure, not for Tsunade, not yet. For Dan. For what he was trying to do. And because someone needs to make sure Tsunade doesn't fall apart on stage, and I'm the only person in the world who knows how to hold her together. Naruto felt something loosen in his chest. A knot he hadn't realized was there. Shizyun's presence at the disclosure wasn't just emotionally significant. It was politically essential. She was Tsunade's most visible associate, the person the village identified most closely with the Hokage. If Shizyun stood beside Tsunade during the confession, it would signal to the public that the people closest to the situation had assessed it and chosen to move forward rather than away. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me. I'm doing this while actively wanting to punch Tsunade through a wall. The only reason I haven't is that my uncle wouldn't have wanted me to. I think your uncle would have wanted you to do exactly what feels right, and punching Tsunade through a wall might feel right later, just not today. Noted. Shizyun stood, tucking Taunton back under her arm. 2 days. 2 days. She left. The tea shop door swung closed behind her, and Naruto sat alone with 2 untouched cups of tea and the sound of rain. Kakashi returned 47 minutes later, sliding into the seat Shizyun had vacated with the boneless ease of a man who'd spent decades appearing in places without anyone noticing him arrive. Got it, he said. Danzo convened an informal session with the advisory council. Not an official meeting, no minutes, no record, just a conversation among concerned elders. What was the conversation about? He pitched a security review. Not the one he filed as a formal motion, this is different. He's proposing a quiet, advisory-level assessment of what he's calling potential vulnerabilities in Hokage-level classified information management. The language is deliberately vague. It could mean anything, which is the point. He wants advisory council authority to investigate Tsunade's classified holdings without specifying what he's looking for. He's trying to get access to her files. More than that. Advisory council authority to investigate Hokage-level classified information would technically include her medical records, her personal archives, her sealed documents, everything. It's a fishing expedition with legal cover. Did they agree? Himura is inclined to support it. He's been uncomfortable with Tsunade's leadership for a while, the drinking, the delegation gaps, the post-pain reconstruction delays. He sees this as a reasonable oversight measure. Koharu is more cautious. She asked for specifics and Danzo deflected. She hasn't committed either way. When's the vote? There's no vote for an informal advisory action. If Himura and Koharu both agree, they can authorize the review by consensus. No council involvement required. When? Danzo's pushing for tomorrow, 1 day before the disclosure. If Danzo got advisory authority to investigate Tsunade's classified holdings, he could legally demand access to her office, her archives, her sealed documents. He could find evidence of the loom's existence through official channels. And worse, he could use whatever he found to frame the narrative before Tsunade had a chance to present it herself. We need to accelerate, Naruto said. Accelerate what? Everything. The disclosure can't wait 2 more days. If Danzo gets that advisory review authorized tomorrow, he controls the information. We need to go first. Tomorrow, Naruto, the preparation isn't complete. Shikaku needs at least another day to position council allies. Sakura's analysis isn't finalized. The public communication strategy has to be good enough, not perfect. If we wait for perfect, Danzo gets there first. Naruto stood, leaving money on the table. I need to see Tsunade. Now. They moved through the rain together. Naruto and Kakashi, teacher and student, navigating the wet streets with the unconscious coordination of people who'd spent years fighting side by side. The Hokage Tower loomed through the drizzle, its windows lit against the gray sky. Naruto took the stairs at a run. Kakashi kept pace without apparent effort. The Anbu guards at the office let them through. Naruto's face was known here now, a regular presence that had become part of the building's daily rhythm over the past few days. He knocked once and entered without waiting. Tsunade was at her desk, working on the disclosure document. Scrolls and drafts covered every surface. She looked up sharply, read Naruto's expression, and set down her pen. What happened? Danzo's moving faster than we thought. He's going for advisory council authority to investigate your classified holdings. If he gets it, he can access your archives tomorrow, before the disclosure. Tsunade's jaw tightened. Hamura, and potentially Koharu. Kakashi's source says the authorization could come as early as tomorrow morning. Tsunade stood and walked to the window, the same window she'd pressed her forehead against 3 nights ago when the world had first started cracking. The rain streaked the glass. The village lay below, gray and blurred. Then we go tomorrow, she said. Are you ready? No. She turned to face him, and he saw it again, that raw, undefended expression, the face of a woman standing at the edge of a cliff. But ready and willing aren't the same thing, and I've been waiting 31 years to jump. The disclosure isn't finalized. We have gaps. Then we fill them tonight. All night if we have to. Bring Jiraiya, bring Kakashi, bring Shikaku if he'll come. She paused. Shizune, she'll be there. Something moved across Tsunade's face, relief, gratitude, and a pain so deep it had no bottom. Good, that's good. They worked. The evening collapsed into the night, and the night stretched toward dawn, and through all of it they worked. Tsunade's office became a war room, maps and documents covering the floor, strategy diagrams pinned to the walls, empty teacups accumulating on every flat surface. Jiraiya arrived within the hour, bringing his intelligence network's latest findings on Danzo's operational capabilities. Kakashi brought his Council Alliance map, updated in real time as new information came in. Shikaku arrived last, cigarette in mouth. Shogi bored under one arm and proceeded to dismantle 3 different versions of the disclosure plan before helping rebuild them into something stronger. Sakura sent her analysis by messenger hawk at midnight. A comprehensive document confirming the loom's scientific validity, backed by data dense enough to satisfy even skeptics. Attached was a separate packet documenting Danzo's research infrastructure, complete with financial records, equipment manifests, and personnel rosters. Naruto read through it, and even knowing what to expect, the scale of it hit him fresh. 20 years. 20 years of secret research, funded by village money, aimed at extracting a biological weapon from the Hokage herself. Shizune arrived at 2 in the morning. She walked into the office, saw Tsunade, and for a long moment, the 2 women just looked at each other across the room. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The weight of 20 years of loyalty and 3 days of betrayal hung between them like a physical object. Then Shizune walked to the desk, picked up a draft of the disclosure document, and said, "The 3rd paragraph is weak. You're hedging. If you're going to confess, confess." "Don't qualify it," Tsunade blinked. I'm here to make sure this works, not to make you feel better. Get back to writing." And just like that, the room had another soldier. Shizune slid into the workflow with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd been Tsunade's operational backbone for 2 decades, catching errors, tightening language, and managing logistics with a competence that made everyone else look slightly amateurish. She didn't look at Tsunade more than necessary. She didn't make small talk. She didn't forgive. But she worked, and the work was flawless, and that was enough for now. By 4 in the morning, the disclosure plan was complete. The format would be a public address from the Hawkage's balcony, the same platform used for wartime announcements and post-crisis speeches. The timing would be mid-morning, when the village was awake and assembled for the daily routine. Tsunade would speak first, delivering the prepared statement that covered the loom, her confession, and the proposed path forward. Naruto would speak second, presenting the unraveling as both a safeguard and a symbol, the assurance that no one person or faction would control the loom's fate. Shikaku would follow with the institutional framework. The joint committee structure, the international oversight proposal, the timeline for assessment and decision. Jiraiya would handle real-time intelligence during the address, monitoring for root activity or external threats. Kakashi would manage Anbu security, ensuring the event couldn't be disrupted by force. Sakura would be positioned at the hospital with her documentation, ready to present the scientific evidence to the medical and scientific community as soon as the address concluded. The council would be notified 1 hour before the address, enough time for them to attend, not enough time for them to organize opposition. Danzo would be notified at the same time. His reaction would tell them everything about how the next phase would unfold. He'll be furious. Shikaku said, marking the timeline on a scroll. The advisory review becomes moot the moment the disclosure goes public. He'll lose his leverage and his information advantage in one stroke. That's the point, Naruto said. Yes, but a cornered Danzo is a dangerous Danzo. He has root, an independent military force that answers only to him. If he decides to act rather than react, he won't. Kakashi's voice was calm, certain. I've served under Danzo's indirect command. He doesn't use force when politics is available, and he doesn't use politics when patience is available. His first response will be to adapt, not attack. He'll take his seat at the table, the one Naruto offered him, and he'll use it to maneuver from the inside. And if you're wrong, then Jiraiya and I are positioned to respond. Kakashi's eye was serious. And Naruto has the Nine Tails. I'd rather not play that card, Naruto said. That's why it's called a last resort. Dawn crept through the windows, gray at first, then tinged with gold as the rain clouds began to thin. The village was waking up. Roosters crowed in the residential districts. Market vendors began setting up stalls. The smell of breakfast drifted up from the streets. Naruto stood at the window and watched Konoha wake. In a few hours, everything would change. The village he'd grown up in, the village he'd fought and bled for, the village that had ignored him and then celebrated him, it was about to learn the truth about its foundations. And the truth was going to hurt. But truth always hurt at first. It was the lies that hurt forever. Jiraiya appeared beside him, his bulk somehow fitting into the window alcove with surprising grace. The old man's face was drawn with exhaustion, none of them had slept, but his eyes were clear and sharp. Nervous? Jiraiya asked. No, liar. Okay, a little, but not about the right things. I'm not nervous about the disclosure. I'm nervous about after, about what comes next. The committee, the international response, the years of work it'll take to actually change the system. One day at a time, kid. You sound like Kakashi. Kakashi sounds like me. I was saying it first. Jiraiya paused. Your mother said something to me once, a few weeks before you were born. She said, the world doesn't change because heroes save it. The world changes because someone decides to tell a truth that everyone else is too scared to say. I think she was talking about Minato, about his decision to be the kind of Hawkage who led from the front instead of from behind a desk. But I think the words apply here too. Mom said that. Kushina said a lot of things. Most of them were threats. But occasionally she dropped something profound in between the promises to punch people. Jiraiya put a hand on Naruto's shoulder. I'm proud of you, for what that's worth, coming from a perverted old man who writes smut novels. It's worth a lot. Don't sell yourself short. I never sell myself short. I sell my books short. My publisher is a crook. Jiraiya squeezed his shoulder and stepped back. Go get ready. I'll be in position by 9. Kakashi's already coordinating Anbu. Shikaku's handling the council notification. All you have to do is stand up there and be yourself. Myself is pretty loud. That's what they need right now. Loud, clear, and impossible to ignore. Naruto left the office and walked home through the brightening streets. The rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking apart, and shafts of morning sun were cutting through the gaps, painting the wet rooftops in gold and silver. The village sparkled, washed clean by the night's rain, every surface reflecting light. He showered, changed into clean clothes, and ate a real breakfast: rice, eggs, grilled fish, a bowl of miso soup. Fuel for the day. He checked his seals, confirmed his shadow clone network. Chapter 5. The truth from the balcony. Naruto stood in the hallway behind the Hokage's balcony and listened to the village gather. The sound came through the stone walls as a low, rising hum, hundreds of voices merging into a single living noise, the way a river sounds when you're standing just behind the bank. Curiosity, confusion, mild annoyance. The public address had been announced at 8 that morning through the standard emergency broadcast system. Signal flares from the tower, runner messengers to every district, the deep brass tone of the village bell that was used only for Hokage-level communications. Most people assumed it was a post-mission security update, or maybe a warning about the recent Akatsuki movements. Nobody expected what was actually coming. Nobody could. Tsunade was in the anteroom behind him, flanked by Shizune and 2 Anbu guards. She wore her full Hokage regalia, white robes, the wide hat with the fire kanji, the green haori draped over her shoulders. Full ceremonial dress. She'd done her hair properly, not the loose tails she usually wore, but a formal arrangement that aged her upward into authority. The transformation jutsu was locked in tight. She looked exactly like what she was supposed to be, the leader of the most powerful hidden village in the shinobi world. But her hands were shaking. Not visibly, she'd tucked them into her sleeves, but Naruto could see the faint tremor in the fabric. Shizune could see it too. The assistant stood half a step behind and to the left, her usual position, close enough to catch Tsunade if she fell. Not that Tsunade had ever fallen. Not in public. Not once in all the years Shizune had stood in that spot. There's a first time for everything, Naruto thought, and immediately pushed the thought away. Council's been notified, Kakashi said, materializing beside Naruto with his usual disregard for dramatic timing. He was in full Jonin uniform, his headband pulled down over one eye, his posture carrying the controlled readiness of a man who was calm because he'd already decided what to do if things went wrong. Hamura and Koharu received the briefing packet at 8:15. Danzo received his at 8:20. 5 minutes later, deliberate, Shikaku's idea. The advisory council elders get the information first, which frames them as insiders rather than outsiders. When Danzo gets it 5 minutes later, it subtly positions him as secondary, informed, not consulted. It's a small thing, but small things matter in institutional politics. How did they react? Hamura went pale and asked for tea. Koharu read the entire briefing without changing expression, and then asked 3 very precise questions about the legal framework. She's sharp, she'll be an ally or an obstacle, and I honestly can't tell which yet. And Danzo, Kakashi's visible eye was unreadable. My contact says he read the briefing, set it down, and sat in silence for 4 minutes. Then he asked for the time of the public address and dismissed the messenger. No questions, no reaction. That's worse than anger. Much worse. Anger means he's off balance. Silence means he's already planning. Naruto looked through the narrow window beside the balcony doors. The square below the Hokage Tower was filling rapidly, shinobi and civilians alike, drawn by the bell and the flares and the simple gravity of an unscheduled Hokage address. He could see familiar faces in the crowd. Konohamaru near the front with his team, craning his neck. Ino and Choji at the edge of the market street. Uruka standing with a group of academy instructors, his scarred face carrying the worried expression he always wore when something big was happening. And further back, positioned at the corners of the square with the practiced invisibility of people who'd been trained to disappear in plain sight, root operatives. Naruto counted 4. Not disguised as civilians, not hidden on rooftops. Standing in the open, visible to anyone who knew what to look for. It was a message. Danzo wanted Naruto to know he was watching. "I see them," Kurama said. 4 in the square, 2 more on the rooftops to the east, and 1, interesting, positioned inside the tower itself. 3rd floor, east corridor. Inside the tower, about 40 meters from your current position, not moving, just waiting. Naruto filed that information and turned to Tsunade. She was standing very still, her eyes fixed on some middle distance, and for a moment she looked less like a Hokage preparing for a speech and more like a woman standing on the edge of a very high cliff, looking down. "Hey," he said. She blinked and focused on him. "You remember what you said to me when I was 12, when I bet you I could learn the Rasengan? I told you you were an idiot. After that," her mouth twitched, "I told you that the will of fire wasn't about being strong, it was about being willing to burn. You're about to burn. But you won't burn alone. Shizun's here, I'm here. Jiraiya's out there somewhere looking like a bush. Half the village is going to be angry, the other half is going to be confused. But you're going to stand on that balcony and you're going to tell the truth, and whatever happens after that, it happens because you chose it, not because someone else chose it for you." Tsunade looked at him. The trembling in her sleeves stilled, just slightly. "You're giving me a pep talk." "Is it working?" "Annoyingly, yes." "Then let's go." The Anbu guards opened the balcony doors. Sunlight and crowd noise flooded in. The square was packed now. 1,000 faces turned upward, 1,000 lives about to be rearranged by what happened in the next 30 minutes. Tsunade stepped out onto the balcony, and the crowd noise shifted. A surge of attention, of respect, the instinctive response of a population that recognized authority even when it didn't always trust it. Naruto followed, positioning himself 2 steps behind and to the right. Shizune took her position on the left. Below and behind, invisible to the crowd, Kakashi coordinated Anbu through hand signals. Shikaku stood in the wings with the council notification scrolls, ready to move into the institutional phase the moment the address concluded. Jiraiya was somewhere in the square, disguised and watchful, his network of toad summons providing real-time intelligence from a dozen vantage points. Tsunade reached the railing. She placed her hands on the stone, and Naruto saw her fingers curl around the edge, gripping hard, anchoring herself. The Hokage hat cast a shadow across her face. The green Haori stirred in the morning breeze. The crowd quieted. It happened naturally, the way it always did when the Hokage spoke, the authority of the position silencing conversation like a hand closing over a candle flame. 1,000 people held their breath. Tsunade spoke. "Citizens of Konohagakure, shinobi and civilians, clan members and civilians, I've called you here today because I owe you the truth. Not a partial truth, not a managed truth. The full, complete, unedited truth about something I've hidden from this village, from the world, for 31 years. Her voice was steady. Not loud, but the acoustics of the square carried it clearly, and a jutsu-enhanced amplification array in the balcony railing ensured that every word reached the edges of the crowd. Naruto watched the faces below shift from attention to curiosity to the first stirrings of unease. What I'm about to tell you involves the founding of this village, the legacy of the Senju clan, and a personal confession that will change how you see me. I ask only that you hear me completely before you judge. Not because I deserve the courtesy, but because the truth is complicated and incomplete understanding is more dangerous than ignorance." She paused. The square was silent except for the wind and the distant call of a bird. "Hashirama Senju, the first Hokage, my grandfather, the founder of this village, created something during the founding era. A biological framework encoded into the Senju bloodline. A tool of immense power, sealed in our very genetics. He called it the Sozo no Kinju, the forbidden loom of creation." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Naruto saw heads turning, saw mouths opening, saw the precise moment when the words sank in and the implications began to surface. Biological framework. Encoded. Senju bloodline. The Forbidden Loom is a chakra-reactive genetic architecture capable of rewriting the cellular template of any living human being. In simple terms, it is a technique that could give anyone any Kekkei Genkai. Would release the Sharingan, the Byakugan. Any bloodline ability that exists, the loom could theoretically replicate. The murmur became a roar. Not of anger, not yet, but of shock, the raw vocal response of a crowd confronted with information too large to process quietly. Naruto heard fragments. Impossible and Kekkei Genkai and. Anyone. And, what does that mean, tumbling over each other in a wave of sound that crashed against the tower walls? Tsunade waited. She let the wave crest and break and begin to recede, and then she spoke again, and her voice cut through the residual noise like a blade. Hashirama sealed the loom because he recognized its danger. A tool that could give anyone any bloodline ability could also be used to create armies of engineered shinobi. It could turn every living senju into a target for extraction and experimentation. It could destabilize the balance of power between nations in ways that would make the Great Wars look like border skirmishes. He made the decision to hide it, to encode it so deeply in senju biology that only someone with Uzumaki-level sealing knowledge could ever access it. She gripped the railing harder. Naruto saw her knuckles whiten. I have known about the loom my entire life. I inherited the knowledge from my grandmother, Mito Uzumaki, and from my grandfather's own records. I have carried this secret through 2 wars, through decades of peace, and through my entire tenure as your Hokage. I kept it hidden because I believed, as Hashirama did, that the world was not ready for it, that the cost of revelation outweighed the cost of secrecy. Another pause. Longer this time. Tsunade's breathing was controlled, medic-controlled, the deliberate rhythm of someone managing their autonomic responses through training and will. Naruto could see the strain it cost her. I was wrong. The crowd went quiet again. Not the held-breath quiet of anticipation, but the deeper quiet of recognition, the sound of 1,000 people hearing something they hadn't expected, from a source they hadn't expected to hear it from. Hokage didn't say, I was wrong. That wasn't how power worked. The cost of secrecy has been enormous. And the worst of it, the part I must confess to you now, the part that will rightfully change how you see me, the worst of it was paid by a man named Dan Kato. Naruto saw Shizune stiffen beside Tsunade. The smallest movement, a tightening of the shoulders, a micro-shift in her stance. But she stayed. She held her position, and she held herself together, and Naruto felt a wave of respect so strong it almost staggered him. Dan Kato was a special Jonin of the Leaf, a medic. A hero of the Second Shinobi War. He was also the man I loved. Tsunade's voice thinned on the last word, not breaking, but stretching, like wire under load. During the war, Dan discovered the Forbidden Loom's existence. He believed, with the idealism and courage that defined him, that the secret should be revealed. That hidden power bred mistrust, and mistrust bred war, and the only way to break the cycle was through transparency. I disagreed. I feared, with reasons I still believe were legitimate, that revelation would endanger the Senju bloodline and destabilize the world order. We argued. Fiercely, passionately, the way only people who love each other can argue. And when I realized that Dan would not relent, that he intended to bring the information to the third Hokage regardless of my objections, she stopped. The silence was absolute. 1,000 people, the wind, the birds, all of it held in suspension, waiting for the next word the way the world waits for the next heartbeat. Tsunade's hands trembled on the railing. The shaking was visible now. She'd stopped trying to hide it. Naruto saw Shizune's hand move, almost reach out, then pull back. Not yet. Not until she was asked. Tsunade spoke, and when she did, her voice was different. Stripped. The voice of a woman standing naked in front of the people she'd sworn to protect, holding nothing back, hiding nothing. I killed him. 3 words. 3 syllables. They fell into the silence like stones into still water, and the ripples spread outward through the crowd in waves of shock, disbelief, and horror. I altered Dan's medical supplies, the healing compounds I personally prepared for him. I reduced the efficacy of his coagulant paste, ensuring that any significant wound he sustained in combat would not close properly. I then approved his deployment to the front line, knowing that the fighting was heavy, knowing that injuries were likely, knowing that his supplies would fail him. The crowd was making sounds now, but not words. Low, gasping, animal sounds, the involuntary vocalization of a collective body processing trauma. Naruto saw faces crumbling. He saw a civilian woman press her hand to her mouth. He saw a Chunin grab his companion's arm. He saw, in the back of the crowd, Uruka-sensei standing perfectly still with tears running down his scarred cheeks. Dan Kato was wounded in combat on the front line. His injuries were survivable, they should have been survivable, but his healing supplies failed. He bled. He bled, and I held him while he bled, and I let him die in my arms, and I let the world believe it was a tragedy of war. Tsunade's voice broke. Not dramatically, not theatrically, it broke the way real things break, with a small, terrible sound that was worse than any scream. She caught it. She held it together with visible effort, breathing through the crack, refusing to stop. For 31 years, I have lived with this. The drinking, the gambling, the years I spent running from this village, they were not grief, they were guilt. My hemophobia, my fear of blood, which so many of you have treated with such compassion and patience, it was not trauma from loss. It was trauma from murder. Every time I saw blood, I saw what I had done, what I had chosen to do. She straightened. The trembling stopped, not because the fear was gone, but because something stronger was overriding it. Something that looked, from where Naruto stood, like the first real peace Tsunade had known in 3 decades. I do not ask for your forgiveness. I do not deserve it. I present this confession to you, to the village, to the families of those who served with Dan, to Shizune, Dan's niece who has stood by me for 20 years without knowing the truth, as an act of long overdue accountability. I am prepared to accept whatever consequences this village deems appropriate, including removal from office and criminal prosecution. She released the railing, stood straight, let the Hokage hat sit on her head with a weight that was no longer the weight of authority, but the weight of history. But the confession is not why I've called you here. I've called you here because the secret that cost Dan his life still exists. The forbidden loom is still encoded in Senju biology. And there are people, inside and outside this village, who know about it and seek to acquire it. The threat Dan tried to address 31 years ago has not been resolved by his death. It has only been delayed. She turned slightly, gesturing toward Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki discovered the truth 5 days ago. He found Dan's journal, read it, and confronted me. He could have used this information to destroy me. Instead, he demanded that I use it to change things. To honor Dan's sacrifice by doing what Dan wanted, bringing the truth to light and letting the world decide how to handle it. He was braver than I was. He was braver than I have ever been. Naruto stepped forward. The crowd's attention shifted to him, 1,000 pairs of eyes, weighted with shock and confusion and anger and grief, all turning to the blonde kid in the orange and black jacket, who stood on the Hokage's balcony like he belonged there. He didn't have a prepared speech. Tsunade had offered to help him write one, and Shikaku had drafted talking points, and Kakashi had suggested key phrases for maximum political impact. Naruto had read all of them and set them aside because he'd never given a prepared speech in his life, and he wasn't going to start now. He looked out at the village. His village. The place that had hated him and feared him and eventually, grudgingly, loved him. The place he'd bled for, fought for, died for, and come back for. The place where Uruka had bought him his first bowl of ramen, where Kakashi had taught him the meaning of teamwork, where Jiraiya had told him that the world was broken and worth fixing anyway. I'm not going to sugarcoat this, he said. What the Hokage just told you is real. The forbidden loom exists. Dan Kato was murdered, and the woman who did it is standing right here in front of you because she finally decided to stop hiding. The amplification carried his voice across the square. He could feel the crowd's emotional state like a physical pressure, fear, anger, betrayal, confusion all churning together in a turbulent mass. I know what you're feeling right now. I know because I felt the same thing 5 days ago. I sat in my apartment and I stared at the wall, and I felt the ground drop out from under me. Because someone I trusted, someone I loved, turned out to be carrying a secret that changed everything I thought I knew about them. He leaned forward slightly, hands on the railing, unconsciously mirroring Tsunade's posture. But here's what I figured out in those 5 days. Being angry at Tsunade is easy. She did something terrible. She knows it. She's told you herself. But being angry doesn't fix anything. It doesn't bring Dan back. It doesn't make the loom disappear. It doesn't change the system that put Tsunade in a position where she felt like murder was her only option. He paused, letting that land. The problem isn't one woman's bad decision. The problem is a world where secrets like the loom exist, where hidden power is hoarded by clans, by villages, by nations, and where good people are put in impossible positions because the system runs on information control and fear. Dan Kato saw that. He tried to change it, and it killed him. Tsunade tried to preserve it, and it destroyed her. Both of them lost, because the system they were operating in didn't have room for the kind of honesty that actually solves problems. He looked down at the faces. Kano Hamaru, wide-eyed, fists clenched at his sides. Ino, tears tracking silently down her cheeks. Choji with his arm around her shoulders. Uruka, steady and sad and proud in a way that Naruto could feel across the distance. And beyond them, a sea of people who were scared and hurt and looking for someone to tell them what came next. I have in my possession a countermeasure. It's called the unraveling, a sealing technique designed by Maito Uzumaki, the first Hokage's wife, as a failsafe against exactly this situation. The unraveling can permanently erase the loom's encoding from Senju biology. Destroy it completely. No more secret weapon, no more target on anyone's back. A stir moved through the crowd. Naruto felt it, a shift in the emotional current, from despair toward something cautiously resembling hope. But I'm not going to use it, not yet, not unilaterally. Because that would be making the same mistake everyone else has made, one person deciding the fate of something that affects the whole world. Instead, we're proposing a process. A real, transparent, legitimate process involving representatives from every clan, every allied village, and independent oversight. A joint committee that will study the loom, assess its risks and its potential, and make a recommendation that everyone has a voice in. He straightened up. This isn't going to be quick. It isn't going to be easy. People are going to disagree. Other villages are going to be suspicious. Some of you are going to be angry at Tsunade, at me, at the system that let this happen. That's okay, be angry. Anger is healthy when it drives you to demand better. Just don't let it drive you to demand less. He stepped back. The square was still, that particular stillness that comes after a storm when the air is clear and everything is washed raw and new and uncertain. Shikaku stepped forward to the balcony railing. He moved with the unhurried competence of a man who'd spent decades managing crises, and his mere presence had a stabilizing effect on the crowd. The Jonin commander, the village's strategic backbone, lending his authority to what had just been said. He laid out the framework in clear, precise terms, the joint committee's composition, the timeline for assessment, the international outreach protocol, the legal process for evaluating Tsunade's confession. Each element was presented as a concrete step, not a vague promise, and by the time he finished, the crowd's emotional state had shifted from raw shock toward something more manageable, still hurt, still confused, but with a structure to hold on to. A sense that the people in charge had a plan, even if the plan was still taking shape. Naruto watched the crowd's reaction and felt the first tentative stirring of hope. Not optimism. Hope was harder than optimism, more fragile and more valuable. The people below him were processing a trauma. But they were processing it together in the open, with the truth laid bare rather than buried. And that was different. That was new. That was what Dan Kato had died trying to make possible. The address ended. Tsunade didn't linger. She turned from the railing and walked into the anteroom with the rigid, controlled gait of a woman holding herself together through sheer biomechanical discipline. Shizyun followed, one step behind, and as they disappeared through the doorway, Naruto saw Shizyun's hand finally reach out and close around Tsunade's elbow. Not a gesture of forgiveness. A gesture of presence. I'm here. I haven't decided what that means yet, but I'm here. The crowd below began to break apart, not in a rush but in a slow dissolution, people peeling away in small groups, talking in low voices, processing. Naruto could hear fragments drifting up. Did she really? And the loom, what does that? And Uzumaki kid, he. And underneath all of it, the steady hum of a village beginning the long, painful work of digesting a truth it had never been prepared to receive. Naruto stayed on the balcony. He leaned on the railing and watched the square empty, and he felt the weight of what had just happened settle onto him like a second skin. It was done. The secret was out. 31 years of silence broken in 30 minutes. Well, Kurama said, that's irreversible. That's the point. I know. I'm merely observing that we've passed the point of no return. Everything from here forward is new territory. No maps, no precedents. I've never been good with maps anyway. True, you navigate by crashing into things until you find the right direction. Below, the last civilians were leaving the square. The Anbu security detail was pulling back to standard positions. And at the far corner of the square, standing in the shadow of a vendor's awning where a casual observer might never notice him, Danzo Shimura watched the empty balcony with his single dark eye. Naruto met his gaze across the distance. They held it for 3 seconds, a silent exchange that carried more information than any conversation. Then Danzo turned and walked away, his cane marking its steady rhythm on the cobblestones. He's not done, Kurama said. I know, but neither are we. Naruto left the balcony and went inside. The anteroom was empty. Tsunade and Shizyun had moved to the private office. He could hear low voices through the closed door, but didn't intrude. That conversation wasn't his. He found Kakashi in the corridor, receiving reports from Anbu operatives through quick, whispered exchanges and hand signals. The security chief looked up when Naruto approached. Clean, Kakashi said. No incidents during the address. Rude observed but didn't act. The operative inside the tower withdrew during Shikaku's portion of the address, fell back to the third-floor corridor, and then exited through the east stairwell. Any movement from the EBSI facility, Danzo's research lab, Sakura's monitoring from the hospital. No alerts so far. Good. What about external? Any indication that the other villages have picked up on this yet? Too early. The address was internal, no international broadcast, but information this big doesn't stay contained. I'd estimate we have 12 to 24 hours before the other cage start receiving intelligence reports. Gaara will hear first. Sand has the best intelligence network in Fire Country. Then, probably Cloud and Mist. Stone will be last. Their intelligence operations in Konoha have been degraded since the war. Gaara will be an ally. Gaara will be sympathetic. Whether he can be an ally depends on how the Sand Council reacts. He's Kazekage, but he's a young Kazekage and his council is conservative. Naruto nodded. Gaara was a conversation he needed to have, personally, directly, before the political machinery could get between them. A message by Hawk would be too slow and too insecure. He needed to send a shadow clone with a personal communication scroll, something that Gaara would recognize as authentic and respond to immediately. He was working through the logistics of this when Jiraiya appeared at the end of the corridor, moving fast. Not running, Jiraiya didn't run inside buildings, but walking with the urgent, ground-eating stride of a man who had information that couldn't wait. Problem, Jiraiya said. How big? Potentially very. My Toad network just picked up an inbound team. 3 shinobi, moving fast, coming from the northeast. They crossed our outer detection.